I have just started the live stream, so it should be live in a moment. It's live.
Hi, Doug. We'll get the minutes. Madigan is still at. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry, to reiterate that the meeting is live on YouTube at this point.
Thanks, Chris. Chris is We're still working with Councillor Madigan right now. All right. Just for the benefit of the viewers, we are live streaming right now, and we're having technical delays with one member of council trying to connect, so we'll give it a few more minutes before proceeding.
Thanks, Sarah.
Based on our procedural bylaw, we allowed for 10 minutes. So I think we should begin the meeting, and we still have a number of staff working with Councillor Madigan to try and get him connected.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. Is there any objection from council members to us proceeding to start the meeting in Councillor Madigan's absence? If there is, just say aye. Okay, seeing none, we'll get going then. And I apologize to our residents and viewers. We're trying to do everything we can to make sure these meetings go smoothly, but technology, for all its benefits, sometimes gets in the way. So I will call the meeting to order. It's now 5:25 on April 20. So welcome, everyone. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And I will look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda. And it is moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and seconded by Councillor Mcleod. Be it resolved that the content of the council agenda for April 20, 2020 be adopted as presented. And I will start with you, Deputy Mayor.
I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda, so I don't think I want to be the seconder here.
Okay, I'll take you off, Councillor Mcleod, and I will put in Councillor Comey. Councillor Comey, are you prepared to second this?
No.
Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. All right, if you have an amendment, then Councillor Mcleod, now would be the time to put it on the table.
Terrific, thank you. We have a very lengthy agenda ahead of us and some very important matters that we want to discuss. And so I'd like to be as fresh as possible for some of those discussions. So pursuant to section 4.11 of the procedural bylaw, I would request that items 17 and 16.2 be moved within our agenda to be considered immediately after the deputations.
So you would like to move to the in-camera session first?
Yes, please. However, I don't want to be rude to our guests, so I think we should do our deputations first and then move into the in-camera, please.
All right, well, before I look for a seconder, I'll look to the clerk. Clerk Almus, is from the staff perspective, are there any issues with this?
My only pause is that we haven't been able to connect the other council member at this time. But that's, I'll leave that to council's discretion.
Okay, and I guess the other issue is that we have all of our viewing audience here now, and so we would be doing it for the extent of the in-camera session portion. With that being said, I guess what we could do is entertain that motion subject to Councillor Madigan's availability after the deputation. So I will look for a seconder to that motion.
I second that.
Councillor Comey. Unless there's any further comments, I will call the vote, and we will start with Councillor Mcleod.
Aye.
In favor. Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan, we don't have here yet. Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
All right, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Jeffrey.
Space bar isn't working anymore. I'm opposed.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
And I am opposed. Deputy Mayor.
Opposed.
So that is carried. So what we will do then is proceed through the agenda to the point where we are at after the deputation. And if Councillor Madigan has not been able to join us by then we'll have to revisit this, because I don't think it's fair to go to the in-camera portion without having Councillor Madigan here.
Sorry, we should do the formal approval of the agenda as amended.
Okay, so then we'll go back and look for the formal approval of the agenda as amended by that motion. And I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Your worship.
Opposed.
Yes, Deputy Doherty, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I apologize. I thought that we were voting to accept the agenda as it was and looking to vote on the amended agenda once we had Councillor Madigan with us, in which case I would have opposed the amended agenda.
I'll look to yes, I appreciate that. Now we've got the vote in the books. I'm going to look to the clerk to see if we're able to unwind that, or if if the vote is binding as is.
You can request immediately after a motion that it be recorded, and you can call the vote again, and the decision of the recorded vote becomes what's carried or defeated.
Okay, so are you asking for a recorded vote then, Councillor Doherty?
Yes, I am.
All right, and I don't need a seconder for a recorded vote. So we're going to now have a recorded vote on the amendment as proposed by Councillor Mcleod, which is to move the in-camera session up after the deputation. And I will start with Councillor Mcleod
In favor.
and Councillor Comey.
In favor.
I don't think we have Councillor Madigan with us yet. Councillor Doherty,
Opposed?
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
Opposed.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
I'm opposed, and Deputy Mayor.
Opposed.
So that's a 4-4 draw, so that defeats the amendment. So we'll now proceed with the adoption of the agenda as is. And it was moved by Councillor Hall, so I will, or Deputy Mayor Hall, so I will start with the Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod,
In favor.
Councillor Comey,
In favor.
Councillor Madigan, I don't believe he's here yet. Councillor Doherty,
In favor?
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin,
In favor?
and I am in favor, so that's adopted without change. Declarations of pecuniary interest, Councillor. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Councillor Berman.
Yeah, I'm going to declare, and I'll look to the clerk to correct me because it's only the second time I've done it. I'm going to declare a conflict of interest, not pecuniary, on number 12.4, the motion to do with the hospital, because my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and occasionally wife and daughter all work there. So
that's a code of conduct declaration, Councillor Berman.
yes, and just to be more specific, while the motion doesn't name the site itself, the literature that council got prior to the meeting does name the site, and it's that site that I'm talking about.
Okay, and is it your intent to recuse yourself from the vote, or are you just declaring that for transparency?
I will, it's going to be hard in this setup. I'll leave the vote.
So you're going to recuse yourself?
Yeah,
Okay.
you'll just have to walk me through it.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I see we have Councillor Madigan with us. Welcome, Councillor Madigan. We're just gone through declarations of pecuniary interest, and we're now at the adoption of the minutes from the special meeting of council held April 8, 2020. And that is a motion by Councillor Mcleod and seconded by Councillor Madigan. And it's be it resolved that the minutes of the special meeting of council held April 8, 2020 be approved as presented. And I'll start with you, Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey,
In favor.
Councillor Madigan,
In favor. I apologize for the long time, but I'm here now. Thank you very much for your patience.
it's good to have you, Councillor Madigan. I had the same issues. Councillor Doherty,
In favor?
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
I am in favor, and Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
All right, so we have adopted the minutes. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes?
I have some, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Comey.
Thank you. There are two items. Item from the previous minutes, item 8.1, which speaks to our economic task force. And Mr. Mayor, I think this question would be for you. And that is the first, we saw some of our residents this week have some concern about the meetings themselves and whether or not they were open to the public. And something that crossed my mind, and I think this will just bring our public at ease, was just confirmation that our recording secretary attends these meetings and that the public and council can anticipate receiving recorded minutes from the task force meeting. Can you just confirm that, please?
Well, I will look for confirmation, but I have had a number of discussions with residents. So this task force is not caught by the Municipal Act. It has 4 members of council on it, so it doesn't need to look to an exemption under section 239 of the Municipal Act. And this is not unusual in council committees. I served as co-chair on the task force looking at the development of Central Park. Those meetings were not open to the public. Our meetings of the Citizens Steering Committee for the Strategic Base Plan of 2015 were not open to the public. And our Economic Development Action Plan Task Force, those meetings were not open to the public. These committees cannot make any decisions that bind this council. They make recommendations that come before council, and council then adopts them. And those recommendations are made in the public forum and subject to all of the discussions around the table that happen naturally with our agenda items before council. So the reason that these committee meetings are not open to the public is to make sure that there is fulsome and open discussion at those committee meetings, and they are not caught, as I said, by the Municipal Act. And with that being said, I'll look to the clerk to address the issue of the minutes.
Certainly. So further to the terms of reference, it was reported and in the staff report that any recommendations of the advisory committee would come back to council in the form of a report versus in the form of minutes. However, there are minutes being taken.
Does that assist, Councillor Comey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, there are minutes being taken by our recording secretary?
No, I believe a resource within the business development group.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, is there a reason we wouldn't use our recording secretary?
Well, I think for the reason that the clerk just indicated, that the report that comes to council will be the report and presentation from the committee that they will be dealing with and making the recommendations, so that the minutes aren't actually being formally adopted by council. Having said that, I'll go to the clerk.
That's correct.
Thank you. So for confirmation, will council see minutes from the meeting?
I would look to the clerk, but generally, as I've described, these minutes are not part of the, are not adopted by council, because we are going to be making a report to council personally with all recommendations from the committee. I'll look to Clerk Almas to clarify.
Certainly. Further to how council minutes are prepared based on the decisions being made at the committee, I believe the task force is operating under the same parameter. So I don't believe that they include the fulsome discussion, just the items that have been decided and items that they will be discussing at their upcoming meeting. So I don't believe it's a detailed committee report like we would have for advisory or board committees.
Okay. Now, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, will those minutes be included in the report we get from the task force?
I don't know if that's been done in the past. Clerk Almas?
That wasn't the intention.
I think a public would appreciate seeing those minutes. You know what it makes me think of? Our IT committee. We take minutes for that, and council gets to see those minutes. So I think it's worthy of consideration for the minutes to be included in a nice way to show the public that here are the minutes. We, you know, the meeting has its own place, but that's my opinion.
Well, thank you for that, and we'll certainly take that under advisement. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. If I could just wade in, I have absolutely no concern about the minutes of these meetings or the meetings themselves being available to the public, in that we have 9 members of private sector corporations who are participating. In many cases, they may be calling upon personal business experience, current state of their business affairs, that these are matters that normally would be subject to privacy and confidentiality, and thus they have volunteered to work with the municipality to bring forward some recommendations that will help all of our businesses. And I think out of deference for the way they normally conduct their affairs, these meetings should be closed to the public, but recommendations will be brought forward and will need to be approved by council in a public forum. So I have no concern for these reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Berman?
Microphone on. Thank you. Just further to both those points, I guess, I'm looking at the terms of reference that we passed for the task force, and page 4, it says all members are expected to declare any conflict of interest, pecuniary or otherwise, prior to decisions made and recuse themselves if appropriate. So my first question is whatever form we're getting, minutes or notes or whatever, will any of those declarations be noted for SIC when it comes forward or for the public?
I'll look to the clerk on that. These aren't in the normal format, so I'm not sure the answer to that.
Okay, so maybe I don't need that answer now, but maybe she could follow up with it, because if it's saying that they're going to be declared in order to make this open and transparent, then I want to make sure that somewhere down the line we get to see whether they've declared. And the sentence after that says, as impacted industry, business, and community leaders will be members of the task force, it is understood that decisions could have a pecuniary impact. Therefore, transparency in the decision-making process is paramount. So I just want to kind of back up the concerns that have come up, not just from Councillor Comey, but from other people and some residents and the media over the past week, that what seems to have happened in meeting 1 contradicts the transparency that seems to be promised in the terms of reference.
Well,
and that's just a comment. I have nothing.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Berman. I will look to the clerk, but as you know, the Council Code of Conduct, which also applies to committees, has a separate schedule that applies to task forces for that very reason. And I'll look to the clerk on that, but my understanding is there's a separate Code of Conduct document that applies to task forces such as this.
Certainly, that is correct. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act would not be enforced for a task force as well. However, taking the conversation under advisement, I can work with the task force and what that report comes back to council, what it looks like, and any mechanisms, if there's any declarations, and how that would be addressed. So we can report back.
Good, thank you very much, Sarah. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just had some feedback. Are people hearing me okay?
Yep.
I just wanted to make maybe a couple of comments, maybe a couple of observations. One would be that from the outset of the first meeting of this particular task force, staff for the town of Collingwood, very much in the same manner, I think, at the outset of a new board or a new staff committee, reviewed their mandate, the protocol in which they are to conduct themselves, conduct the meeting, etc. And throughout the process of the meeting, it became abundantly clear of a couple of things. One, to alleviate any concerns, and I was quite disappointed to read in the paper that somebody would have the audacity to refer to some of these members as being a poorer choice than their own dog. The people who have put their names forward, their time, their talents, have their heart on their sleeve for the town of Collingwood and for the region, for that matter. They are doing this for the betterment of us. I was speaking to my colleague, Councillor Mcleod, earlier today, and I said to her, I said, Marion, I had a chance to speak with one of the task force members at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, and I felt out of place because this person's level of expertise and what they are bringing to this task force and to this community is second to none. And I am confident in a transparent and open way, they will be coming forward to council, not only with updates, but final recommendations and a report that will allow the 9 members of this council to make the best decisions possible to benefit the greatest number of people in our community during the greatest crisis we have ever faced. This is not a time for politics. This is a time to step up and show leadership. This task force, who have membership that sprinkles across our community wide and deep, will bring forward the very best for us to consider. To any resident who has any question as to their integrity, to their ability, and to the level to which they will serve all residents of the community, need to think long and hard about their concerns. We've never faced anything like this before, and it is time that we as a community come together and rally around various peoples, including this task force, so that we can move forward, ensuring that when we come out at the end, this community not only is in a standing position, but is ready to embrace whatever future challenges there may be. This is not a 1-month event. This is not a 3-month event. This is something that we need to be looking beyond the horizon. And this task force and the levels of conversation, and I hope the other 3 that were part of that first session would agree with me, are the highest level of thinking with a goal to serving today in the short term and the long term. And I am thankful for their time, and I look forward to them coming forward in the near future with solid recommendations on behalf of the community.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well said. Are there any other comments or questions on that issue? Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring the discussion back to the issue that Councillor Comey raised, which is whether there should be a release of minutes from the meeting. I don't think anyone at our table is contesting, the genuine interest and dedication of the individual business people who have come to the table. And I'm sorry that seemed to have been seen as the issue. I don't see it as an issue, and I didn't hear anyone challenge that. But I honestly can't see what the problem would be to having minutes of this meeting made public, even if it is just the resolutions that come out of individual discussions. If there is secret business information, as alluded to by Councillor Doherty, that does not need to be recorded, but the outcome of the discussion could be. And I'd like to suggest perhaps that this matter be taken up with the task force with a view to seeing whether they have any opposition to the resolutions being put into some kind of format that could be released to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. To be very clear, any resolutions that are passed by this task force will be a matter of public record because they will be coming to council. And I think we are getting a little wrapped around the axle on a technicality here, because the 4 or 5 task forces that I mentioned, none of their meetings were minuted and brought before council, because all of their reports and recommendation and the foundation and any data that led to the recommendations or resolutions all came to council. So there was no secrets held behind about goings on or decisions that were made or how decisions were impacted. I can also advise that each of the 9 members on the task force, the civilian local business leaders, have all been asked to sign a confidentiality agreement, because sometimes the information that comes across the table will have sensitive information, as alluded to by Councillor Doherty. It doesn't mean that they're doing business behind anyone's back or obtaining an advantage because they are caught by the code of conduct that is specifically relevant to a task force. So with all the comments that are being said, we will take it under advisement, and there will be discussion at the task force, but any minutes that come back will be extremely high level for all the reasons that we've just discussed. And I guess if I can pick up on something said by the Deputy Mayor, we are seeing our upper levels of government working together on a very consultative and collaborative basis. We're seeing a federal government that's a minority government that's passing massive relief packages very quickly in efforts to try and ease our public. What I think our public needs now is a hopeful message from their government about how we find our way forward together collaboratively and cooperatively with the upper levels of government, with our regional government, Simcoe County, and with our residents. And I think we need to take that into consideration. We are doing our best for our community with established procedures that have been used in the past. And I would hope that we will all work together to make sure we do that to the best of our abilities, understanding the incredible uniqueness and time-sensitive challenges that these current circumstances are putting upon our residents. Councillor Comey, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, I'm totally shocked about the sensitivity about thinking that any of us who would like to see minutes are worried about secrets, advantages to self, or behind the back deals. Honestly, from my own perspective, I had hoped that the seeing what was transpiring would allow people to consider them, including myself, and come up with alternate ideas. I spent a lot of time thinking about, what could be done to help our business community. And I'm not worried about something happening behind anybody's back. I just think if we're all in it, we should all be putting our shoulder to the wheel and offering what we have to offer. And I would like to see things as they go along, not be, provided a package at council where there's nothing more really to be added. So anyway, that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I guess it's surprising, that there was none of these concerns around the Economic Development Action Task Force. So this does seem to be somewhat unusual to that discussion and different from the discussions that I had as a member of this council, going back to when I was co-chair of the steering committee for Central Park. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just wanted to address one comment by Councillor Hamlin, and that's the fact that if you have thoughts, you should submit them in writing to the task force for our consideration. I think the whole point is that this task force will be spitballing, and it is very fluid because the government, federal and provincial, are coming out with things on an ongoing basis. So some things that we're talking at one point may move to a back burner as our other levels of government engage. So I think that if you have something to contribute, you should make sure you get it to us in writing, or speak to one of the four of us who are on the committee to make sure that your input gets there, because we're all in this together, and I think anybody who can contribute should do it the best way they can.
That's an excellent point, and we would encourage input from any and all council members. Councillor Comey, you had another matter from the last minutes?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that is item 11.2.3. I thought I'd take a check and make sure I was unmuted there for a sec. And that was where council here and authorized $500 to be provided to each publicly funded high school from the COVID fund related to their food programs. And I just wanted to see the status of those funds.
I'll look for Treasurer Leonard.
Through you, your worship, we signed those checks today, but Councillor Comey, as I responded to you on Friday, that the checks would be in the next check run, and that would occur on Friday, which it did. Because during this pandemic, our internal protocol requires that paper will sit for at least 24 hours before passing on to the next person in the chain. So in this case, if the checks are printed today, I will sign them on Tuesday or Wednesday, and the mayor will likely sign them a couple of days after that. However, the mayor has signed them this afternoon. We will leave them again for another minimum 24 hours, and some of the finance staff will come in and place those in envelopes, and once that's done, they'll sit for another minimum 24 hours, and schools will be contacted to receive their cash.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Great. So then just to clarify, the schools have been contacted to anticipate this money, or we're saying we're going to contact them?
Marjorie?
You again, your worship. Once the checks have gone through the process, then we will contact them. And I also indicated to you that there's a potential that we may be able to make a availability for them to come and pick them up at the town hall, because we do provide a number to call if we have deliveries coming. We can call the schools and tell them that their check will be ready on Friday or Thursday, if that's where it happens to be this week, and they can come to the front door, call the number, and somebody will send them or come down and meet them and give them the checks.
Thank you, Marjorie. Did that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's something for all of us to consider as we move forward with this community-based fund. Mr. Mayor, you were using words like it's an incredible time and everything is time sensitive. So I think what the treasurer just raised is something for all of us to consider as we move forward, trying to get urgent funds out the door from council to those in need in our community. The treasurer just raised something I certainly wasn't aware of, and that's this need for paper to sit around because of COVID. So I would say to, fellow councillors, for us to be very much aware of the time between us trying to get funds out the door to those in need and, delays related to paper. I had hoped that perhaps our group that was working with the community supports might have reached out to the two groups in the interim to at least give them a heads up that council had unanimously passed this motion to get them some funds. There's several days between us last meeting and doing this and today. So I suppose going forward, I will work harder to clarify who's going to take the ball and notify the specific groups that they can anticipate funds, because I thought we created this community fund so it could be very agile and get out to those in needs as quickly as possible, with no disrespect to the treasurer who's doing everything she clearly can. So I appreciate that update.
Yes, and certainly any member of council who brings a motion can notify the interest groups involved, and I've done that several times in the past. And just for council's information, all mail that comes in is set out in council chambers and left to sit for 72 hours to 3 days before it is handled and then sorted. And then between every staff member, it sits between 24 and 36 hours for the obvious health reasons that are mitigating for us to have a meeting this way. So we are trying to do everything in our power to do these things quickly and efficiently, but we're also very conscious of the health and safety of our staff and our community. Moving on, then we're at item 5, community announcements, and I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just wanted to mention 3 things this evening. I think the first is that I, like every Canadian, were shocked and saddened at the events that that took place this weekend in Nova Scotia. And certainly my thoughts are with all of the victims' families, and the people of Nova Scotia. The second is that this is a volunteer week, and I just wanted to bring to council and to the public's attention, although it has been very well pushed on social media, including our media channels, but a local entrepreneur whose name is well known throughout the community now, Brandon Houston, is behind a new endeavor. It is called Collingwood Common. And if you have a few minutes, take a look at collingwoodcommon.com, collingwoodcommon.com. And this is something that has been put together fairly quickly in response to COVID-19 to allow, first and foremost, people who are business owners in a retail capacity or in the food and beverage capacity to set up very quickly an online store to showcase their products, to be able to transact commerce and receive payment. And then, of course, the other flip side of that is for the consumer to be able to access the businesses within our community who are offering those services. This is completely free. It is being set up as we speak. And for those in the retail and the restaurant industry, it is available to anyone. So I would encourage people to take a look at collingwoodcommon.com. And it is a new site. So if you Google it and you don't put the .com in, make sure you scroll down, because what you'll find very quickly is there is a Collingwood Commons in Australia. The other thing that I would just like to mention is I'd like to send out best wishes to a friend and a former colleague, Dale West. For many people in the community, you remember Dale as a former voice of the Collingwood Blues, West Point on 95.1. He and I served on a term of council, and of course he's synonymous with hockey, whether it be Silver Stick or Collingwood minor hockey. Dale, a week ago Saturday, had a serious health scare and is recovering. And I certainly want to send out my best wishes to he, Linda, and to his two sons. And for those who know, Dale is passionate about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I am passionate about the Montreal Canadiens. And Dale, if you're listening or watching, I look forward to our conversations and our long-standing debates over the merits of which team is better. And of course, we all know the answer to that question. So with that, I pass it over to Councillor Mcleod.
Yes, I think you're going to lose that argument, Councillor Hall, but thank you for those. And Councillor McLeod.
Just before the meeting began, I was involved in not involved, but I watched a Facebook Live with Dale. And in it, he said that he wouldn't wish watching a council meeting on his second worst enemy. So I think you can rest assured that he is not taking part in this meeting. I want to be very brief and say thank you to everyone who is taking the advice of our health experts, with the possible exception of the person whose dog was off leash on the trail this morning. I have been very impressed with how careful everybody that I have seen and encountered in the last, if you can believe it, 6 weeks has been with their personal space and the rest of it. And I am taking a tremendous amount of heart from the charts and graphs that I'm seeing on worldometer.com, which suggest we are experiencing success and have actually flattened the curve. Earlier today, in a presentation from the province, we saw that we are actually in a best case scenario at this point. So we can all pat ourselves on the back for the enormously difficult work it is to not see our friends and to learn how to Zoom with our grandmas. And it is a pain and inconvenient, but it does appear to be working. That said, just because the parachute has slowed you down does not mean you need to take it off as you continue your descent. And so this is not the time to stop any of those things. And so my dog will remain on leash, and I hope yours will too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. That was good news today, but they did extend the non-essential business closures till May 12th. So they're exactly what you said is correct. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor McLeod. That's true, and there's lots of families still at home with lots of kids in the house and taking them out responsibly and so on. So good point, it is not easy to do. I just want to give a big thank you to the participants who came out to support our International Women's Day event, as well as to town staff who were part of the Women's Day committee who did such an outstanding job. It certainly was a refreshing bit of good news to see that $2,500 was raised from that event to go to my friend's house. And it's extra special at a time when so many of our community groups and not-for-profits are not able to host the events that they so count on, some of them just once a year, that bring in so much of their fundraising. So a huge thank you to everyone who participated in those various events, and to the staff that did such an outstanding job putting together that particular event.
It was an excellent event. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor Hull and Councillor McLeod for their kind words about Dale. as some of you might know, but most might not, Dale is my first cousin. His mother is my dad's sister. So it was a very scary time for the family to, I actually was riding my bike by Dale's house when it happened. So it was kind of scary. So I'm happy that he is somewhat mobile, as mobile as Dale will ever get. And I will tend to agree with Deputy Mayor Hull on the hockey team thing. I'm not really a Leafs guy either. So there, we made Keith smile on camera. That's hard to do. I'm quite happy for that. And other than that, yeah, I think everybody, Councillor Mcleod said it, we are flattening the curve and just keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for me this evening.
Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me either this evening.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I would just like to thank the Deputy Mayor for his thoughts extended to Colchester County and Nova Scotia. I sent my comments to my FCM colleague, Councillor Tom Taggart, this morning, and I know that they are all shell-shocked there and trying to deal with two major crises at the same time. So again, our thoughts out to them in Nova Scotia. And then also just to ask everyone who can, there are a lot of virtual fundraisers going on right now for some of the fundraising organizations that we have in the town. And so if you see them, they too have a lot of processes going on that COVID have impacted and are costing them more money. So if you see a virtual event that's replacing an annual event, please support if you can. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. Just a few things I'd like to mention. Firstly, the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay is convening a Zoom discussion on May the 6th at 4:30 for an hour. And it will be the beginning of a number of discussions that are intended to be held on harnessing a multi-sector approach to looking at recovery for our region. And I should say it's not just the Institute, but collaborative partners. And the idea is to tap into the sectors which we know support the entire economy, not just business or government, but also charities and nonprofits and philanthropists. And look to this region with a view to planning for the recovery of traditional businesses and not-for-profits and charities, nurturing the collaboration of municipal governments across the region, and importantly, seeding the growth of emerging economies, including social enterprise through social innovation. So if this is of interest to any of the members of council or the public, I would urge them to look at the website for the Institute and sign up. As I say, it's May 6th. Secondly, the annual Murray J. Clerkson Award, which is a $1,000 cash prize award to talented emerging artists who reside in the South Georgian Bay region. The applications for that are now open and are accepted to June 25th. And lastly, I just wanted to say, please shop local. It's so easy to think it's sitting at your computer and maybe go to Amazon or some such. But lots of our local shops are online as well, and they sell coffee and all kinds of wonderful things. So shop local. That was it. Thank you.
That's a great point, Councillor Hamlin, and I'll pick up with that. And this ties into the Deputy Mayor's shout out to some local businesses that have set up the Collingwood Common website. You can go on there to order food, you can shop local, and you can experience events virtually. And I'd like to put a shout out and a competition. There is a national campaign underway, and I'm asking Collingwood residents to join it, and that is to make Wednesdays #takeout day. And so you can go to Collingwood Common, you can find all the local restaurants and what fare they have, and you can place your orders through that. And there's also linked to the Collingwood, the Facebook group, Collingwood Takeout and Delivery, which is giving a local restaurants a shout out. So every Wednesday, I'm looking to our residents to get onto the Collingwood Common website and to shop local and order out on that day. It is National Volunteer Week, and we know that throughout the year, our residents benefit hugely from the dedication and commitment of our local volunteers. And this year, the circumstances are a little different, but we still should take the time to celebrate all those volunteers locally, but also in this time to recognize the volunteers that are coming out and making lives for other citizens, vulnerable citizens, easier during this time. And our staff has put together the Collingwood Together volunteer database. My understanding is we have over 150 people signed up already. And I do know that the deputy mayor is one of those people. And while he is modest enough to say he has no skills, he's an excellent driver, and he's done his first delivery for local residents, and he may have done others. And I myself have signed up this morning, so I'm waiting. I have the same skill as the deputy mayor. I can drive a car, so I'm looking forward to doing that. And we do have on our town website, on our COVID website, this thank you poster, which you can download. And I'm asking everyone in our community to put that in your windows to acknowledge the hard work of our frontline workers, whether they be healthcare, hospital workers, doctors, nurses, kitchen staff, cleaners, and even carpenters. When I was in town hall or in the hospital the other day, they were making changes to make sure that they have properly isolated facilities. And but as well, there are workers outside the hospital, caregivers in all of our local nursing homes who are under a huge burden. We've all seen the number of nursing homes that have COVID has got in the door, and the potentially lethal consequences. So we know all of our local seniors homes are working extremely hard to protect their residents and on a daily basis. So I would ask people to support them. Finally, further to what the deputy mayor said, I know Dale West for all his hard work in our community for hockey and other causes. But Dale, get well, take care of yourself, and we look forward to hearing you call the Collingwood Blues games this upcoming season. And with that said, we will move on then to our public meetings. We have none, and our deputation. So we have a deputation. It's a request for 2021 commitment from Collingwood re-recruitment and retention of family physicians, Blue Mountain Joint Municipal Physician Retention and Recruitment Committee. We have Councillor Andrea Matrosovs and June Porter. Clerk, can you patch them in for us, please?
Yes, they're joining us.
I see Andrea.
Hello there.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Good, thank you.
And we're waiting for June. Is June coming on with you today?
Yes, she has been texting back and forth with me.
Okay, we're hearing her.
I'm here.
Good. Okay, we have you, June. We may just not have you on our sidebar unless we scroll down. So I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Andrea and June. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my name is Andrea Matrosovs. I'm a councillor for the town of the Blue Mountains, and I'm here with June Porter, who is the chair of our Joint Physicians Recruitment and Retention Committee. We are actually, this is our third deputation, and so far we're 2 for 2. So we've already presented to Clearview Township, and we've also presented over to Grey Highlands. And I'm happy to announce that both of them have appointed a council member onto this committee. So we are now speaking as a group of 3 municipalities in the area, and we hope that perhaps you might consider joining us. So I am going to just leave this introduction over to June, who is going to go through the next few slides about the needs and the stages of recruitment. And then I'll do a conclusion with the proposed collaborative regional approach. June, over to you.
Thank you. I want to talk about, first of all, MPPs and MPs receive, we have the next slide, please. Physician needs in our region, our MPPs and MP offices report 2 to 3 calls per week asking on where and how constituents can find a local family physician. Local clinics receive up to 50 calls a week. And there's also the invisible data, the constituents who do not have access to a local doctor or have a doctor but it may be up to a 2 to 3 hour drive away, which makes it very difficult to manage chronic conditions and other issues that family physicians are best to deal with. Next slide, please. Family physicians are your versus emergency care. Family physicians are the first contact and principal point of continuing care. When a patient presents to them, they know the context of their presenting symptoms. They know their family, their situation, their employment, whether they're returning to work from a compensation injury, whether they need to have their cancer screening done, whether their blood pressure, high blood pressure, diabetes needs monitoring, etc. Whether they need a referral to secondary care. And people who do not have access to a family physician are less likely to have access to cancer screening guidelines and or a flu shot. Emergency care, 20% of the visits to emerge are from lack of access to a local family physician. The examples can be to renew a prescription and there's no follow-up on the monitoring, the effectiveness, the dosage, and also for a non-emergency injury. Next slide, please. Finding physician candidates. Attracting candidates begins, it's a long game process, beginning with medical school, residency programs, which are 2 to 3 years, and also attracting international medical graduates, affectionately known as IMGs. Communication with this is equally a long and very complex process in the sense that it involves professional and personal levels of communication, and also websites and extensive social media, which this age group uses extensively. Next slide, please. There is good news though. 65 of residents intend to practice in the province that they do their program in, and 50% of them say proximity to family is a top reason for choice of practice location. This information is from the Canadian Residency Association. Our region has excellent rural lifestyle. It has cultural, recreational, and culinary experiences. So we have what we need to attract them as well. Next slide. As I mentioned, recruiting a rural family physician is a long, complex process involving when they begin in medical school. This slide really highlights some of the major touch points that we have in medical school, what goes on in between first and second, and then third and fourth year. The family residency practice after they go through the CARMS and selection process, the meet and greet, the touch points as well, again, developing the relationship, and then into community practice, which is around the orientation guide, making sure equally through this process, their spouse or partner and family is accounted for, because oftentimes the physician you're trying to recruit isn't the major decision maker of the process. And also around, it takes a community to recruit a physician. And then around actually how you retain the physician. And I'll hand you back to Andrea.
Thank you. So if we could please have the next slide. So the reason that we're coming forward to you today is to appeal to you to consider together working to create a voice and a presence for our region. It is working, and it's a chance for us to actually highlight what we have to offer in comparison to larger communities or larger cities. Professional recruiting strategies do work, and pooling the resources together in regions definitely works. I'm going to use an example of David Gravel, who is a professional recruiter who works up in the Midland and Penetang and Tiny and Tay region. So putting all those together, when he was at the ROMP event with June Porter and myself, and we were all there in the name of recruiting for our various regions, there is an opportunity for each recruiter to get up and actually talk about their region. And what he stressed is that given those 4 regions put together, they offered a population of 50,000. That was a real attraction for these young physicians who are looking for a place to grow their practice and grow their professionalism. And then of course, everything that they could offer in terms of the lifestyle for the families as well as the physicians. So it's that kind of example that we can do down here as well in the South Georgian Bay region. Could I please have the next slide? And here you can see some professional approaches that were at the recent event that was at Blue Mountain Resort by ROMP at the Rural Resident Retreat. And what you'll note there is that June Porter and myself were there representing the town of Blue Mountains, and Tyler King was from the Economic Development Department over at Wasaga Beach was there as well. And then beyond those two, everybody else is working with professional recruiting strategies in regional approaches, as you can see here. And that is a real key point about the collaboration, because first of all, I've mentioned, and June has mentioned, that recruiting strategies include building relationships. It's not about handing out money up front in terms of offering large incentives. What really these professional recruitment, this industry has found is that it's actually about building those relationships and about working with those people, and not just the physician, but the families behind them as well. And there is a real sense of collaboration when we work in that community. There is actually an organization called Casper, which oversees the staff recruiters that work on physician recruiting across Canada as well as Ontario. And they work in collaboration with each other, and we'd like to be part of that as well. Sometimes it's a matter of you're talking to a potential physician who may in fact be a right fit for a different region. And when they all know each other, and when we all participate in that conversation, they might say, you know what you're looking for, what your spouse, what your family's looking for would best be matched in South Georgian Bay. You should go talk to that group there. So that's the kind of cross transition that we can hope for if we join in this as a larger regional voice rather than just specific municipalities here. And could I just go on to the next slide, please? So in conclusion, this is a regional approach. We might find that a physician is considering this area, loves the fact that there is this awesome hospital in Collingwood, but perhaps it's a spouse who's looking for a job and manages to find a job lead down in Clearview. Maybe they're seeking a rural lifestyle and they'd like to live in Grey Highlands, and maybe they like to recreate and they're attracted, and something that helps them seal the deal is that they have Wasaga Beach and the Blue Mountains next door at their doorsteps as well. It is a holistic regional approach that we can do. So what we're asking you to do is to please join us. Grey Highlands has appointed Councillor Tom Allwood, and Clearview has appointed Mayor Doug Measures to join us in this committee. So the very first step is becoming a partner, coming to that table and talking with us and talking about how we can best utilize our group person power as well as our dollars. So coming to the table to at least be part of that conversation in this first part would be awesome. It would be wonderful to have you at the table with us. The consideration of the dollars that you see there, we here in the Blue Mountains have allocated $25,000 in our budgets ahead of time, but obviously Grey Highlands and Clearview now need to pool that into their 2021 consideration. So that's understandable, but really what we'd like to see is we'd like to see you join us here at the table so we can have that conversation together. So please consider that, because I think with everything that we all have to offer here in South Georgian Bay, we can really enhance the lives and the health of the people that live here. Thank you.
So now that I told my funniest joke, I will now share with you what I should have said, and that was thank you very much, Andrea and June, for that. If there's no questions, council will take this under advisement and consider it going forward. Councillor Comey's got her hand up. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through to the presenting committee, either one can answer. I made a note. It says you refer to websites and social media. Does your group have its own website and social media account, or you advertise on other websites and social media?
I can answer that question. I'm also a board member of two clinics that serve the town of Blue Mountains and Meaford. And they are actually working to redevelop their website on advice that our website needs to be very current, upbeat, and also have like Twitter feeds. So we have a Twitter account where I follow potential candidates on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and with email, we follow up and address some questions they have, and certainly just in building the longevity of their relationship in hopes that they will, consider practicing in the town of Blue Mountains. There's also other avenues that a professional recruiter would use. There's Facebook pages for different classes through their class presidents, etc., but it is quite extensive. There's also something that we would put forward to speak about should you join the committee is there's a number of great examples. Our communications manager currently has a few examples of what towns actually put on their websites to attract physicians. And certainly that's something we would encourage through the committee, other municipalities to do.
And what I can add to that too, through you, the chair, is that I'm looking at an article that was that quoted David Gravel back in 2019, just last year, and he refers to their real shift over the years that he's been there into what they call a 5-pronged approach. So online and social media is one of those 5-pronged approaches. So is peer-to-peer recruitment. So working with the existing physicians that are in the area to help build that community as well, along with traditional recruiting and relationship building, and of course, education about the awesome place that they can practice as well as live here. Thank you.
That all sounds very awesome. Thank you so much. I didn't want, what is the Twitter handle? Because I'd like to follow it.
I can make sure that's made available to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Councillor Hamlin.
Hi, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just have a few questions. Are you contemplating a professional recruiter would be hired by a regional group?
Yes, we would be doing so.
And what area are you considering to be the region of South Georgian Bay?
Oh, that's a good question. I can answer that. So we have now, as I've mentioned, we've already been to Grey Highlands and to Clearview and now to you. We're also reaching out to Wasaga Beach. Although they're not a direct neighbor to the Blue Mountains, we are very much a South Georgian Bay area, and we have lived that way for decades. So we know that that works very well. And then over to the other side, we go as far west as Meaford, and Meaford, of course, has the bookended hospital in conjunction with Collingwood.
Thank you. And my last question is, how many doctors do you think we need for this South Georgian Bay area?
I think that's a very good question, and that's part of the work I would like the committee to undertake. We have a good feel in sort of the Meaford, Town of Blue Mountains area. Currently, we're 8 physicians short. But I think I'm not sure that other communities, municipalities are completely aware of what their need is. So it's really setting out the methodology to actually come up with a definitive number. I also think too, and we've talked about it in our committee, it's not just about face-to-face access, and certainly that's come to the forefront in the COVID pandemic we're in right now, is we need access to. So I think there's an opportunity to explore how we can do that as well.
Oh, that is fantastic. I'm so glad you've come to our council with this request. So, Mr. Mayor, may I ask you then, what is the appropriate way to get this matter? I guess we need a report from our staff and have this brought back.
Yes, that is, and I'll look to the clerk, but my understanding is it would go back to staff for a report and then come before council.
Thank you.
That is correct. I'm not sure necessarily a report at this point, but we will be including it on the next regular agenda.
All right. Seeing no more questions. Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, June, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Oh, go up. Councillor Mcleod is shaking her hand.
I was waving at Andrea. Sorry.
Hello.
Consider yourself waived, Andrea.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Yes, you too. Take care. So next on the agenda, we have no consent agenda items. We have number 9, reports of minutes and other committees, and 9.1, we have a resolution And it's moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that the minutes of the following boards be hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. Collingwood Public Library Board minutes, January 23, February 27, and March 13, 2020. And the Collingwood Police Services Board minutes, February 3 of 2020. A question or comments, Council? Councillor Comey?
Oh, the space bar did work. Thank you, Councillor Mcleod. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will have a couple questions regarding the Police Services Board's minute. Would you like me to ask them now or?
Yes,
hold
go
that
ahead.
off? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think through you to our Police Services Board Chair, Councillor Jeffrey, a couple of things in the minutes popped out at me from this meeting. And the first one was item 9.3, the Simcoe Muskoka opioid strategy. And I think it's worth highlighting. We have here, Inspector Shannon provided a brief background of the Simcoe County opioid crisis. Collingwood Police Services has begun tracking local overdoses and is monitoring the situation with the crisis closely. Do you happen to know if Inspector Shannon will be able to publish that data, like if we would anticipate seeing it in the minutes?
Through you, Mayor Saunderson, to Councillor Comey, we would have to put the request through to Inspector Shannon. Any statistics that are published at our meeting are available for public circulation, and the media is usually there to take those stats away. So we would have to ask Inspector Shannon if those are available for public consumption. But we can do that.
Yeah.
I would.
If I can add to that, this is the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit that takes control of those statistics. And I can tell you that from a demographic perspective, Collingwood ranks fourth behind Barrie, Orillia, and Midland for numbers of overdoses. And the can't get COVID out of my head. The opioid strategy is that they're looking at destigmatizing the use of the opioids. So they're treating the addiction and making sure that they crack down on the suppliers. So it's based loosely on the Portuguese model. Well, they've actually decriminalized all drug offenses for usage, but not for pushing. So that's the model they're working under. And you might find more statistics at the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit on that stuff. But certainly, as Councillor Jeffrey indicated, we could ask Inspector Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it comes across in the minutes as if it's potentially new for Collingwood, because here it says Collingwood Police Services has begun tracking local overdoses. So I appreciate Councillor Jeffrey as chair offering to ask Inspector Shannon if the community will be able to see that data. And again, with regard to the minutes, item 9.5, photo radar. And I think very hopeful, as I'm sure most of our parents are, that school will be back in session in September. And we have here in the minutes that Inspector Shannon is more or less not a fan of moving, sort of looking into this with regard to cost versus the size of Collingwood. But as I've previously mentioned to Councillor Jeffrey, I would like to see an opportunity for Director Slama, perhaps John Valek, to sit down with Inspector Shannon and have a discussion. Because I first brought my question about photo radar to Director Slama and said, can we explore this for Collingwood? And then sort of turned out Inspector Shannon had some opinion on the matter. What would be the best way to get this out for council and community discussion?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I pointed out to Councillor Comey that the best way would be to send a letter to the committee suggesting other input. And it wasn't whether Inspector Shannon was a fan or not a fan of photo radar. What she presented to us was a business case in terms of their ability to up in terms of calls or service or a presence in the area versus the cost of photo radar and the return on investment. So that was the initial discussion. So I think a letter to the committee otherwise, and we can delve into it a little further. I think that our senior staff representative for the Police Services Board is the Executive Director, Sonia Skinner. And Sonia would have the authority to follow up with Director Slama if that information is needed for the committee consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, just as a
Councillor Comey, you have any more items?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, yes, and I appreciate it was sort of a cost-benefit analysis, but it wasn't one that our staff or community got to see. And we certainly know there are, without question, speeding concerns in certain areas of our community, Finley Drive as an example, that are close to schools. So I'm hopeful that if we can get this discussion, if I need to write a letter to somebody, I'll write a letter, okay, to get the issue of photo radar out for council's consideration and public input. But I would very much like to see the cost benefit analysis behind it. And I think staff would too.
Very good. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship, and also through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So in the absence of photo radar, there are still other mechanisms whereby we can track, control, discourage speeding in areas that have been targeted in town as being a problem. Would that be correct?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Through you, Mayor Saunderson, yes, that's absolutely correct. What Inspector Shannon referred to was their ability to up a presence in any problem areas, but also, again, encouraging, as we do with all things, that people make the calls to the police, not to 911, but report incidents. And if you can get the license plate numbers, that is even better, because they will follow up with the vehicle owners. So we just ask that people continue to report any instances that they have, and Inspector Shannon can speak to the rest, and I will leave it up to the Executive Director to follow up with her staff needs as required.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Doherty?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I saw your hand up, so.
Yeah.
All right, and we would certainly like to thank the police for all their work on the front line while this COVID crisis goes on. I know they're making great efforts to have more boots on the ground and patrols out in the streets, and they're working very collaboratively with our bylaw enforcement to make sure that there's no gatherings over 5 people, and that non-essential services are closed down. And before I call the vote, Councillor Berman, just a comment. I know in the library minutes, CEO Hay talked about meeting with myself and the Deputy Mayor, and we're certainly happy to meet anytime to discuss the county request for information. So if you can pass that along, thank you. So unless there's any other comments, I'm going to call the vote, and I'll start with you, Councillor Comey.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I'm in favor, and Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, how do you, oh, there you go.
I'm in favor. Thank you.
And Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Good. So that passed unanimously. All right. Next, we get to Standing Committee reports. 10.1 Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee report of March 2, 2020. Quite a while ago. So Councillor Mcleod, you'll be moving all of these, and Councillor Comey, you're seconding the first one. What I'll do is read it in, and then I will pass it over to you, Councillor Mcleod. So the first motion is, be it resolved that Council receive the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 2, 2020, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. 10.1.1 minutes of various committees and boards received. Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes, October 2, 2019. Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes, January 7, 2020 and January 9, 2020. Museum Advisory Committee minutes, January 16, 2020. Trails Advisory Committee minutes, January 9, 2020. 10.1.2 C 2020-3, establishing a Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee. 10.1.3 CC 2020-3, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, Joint Initiative. 10.1.4 PRC 2020-3, Public Art Mural Commission, 28 Huron Street. 10.1.5 PRC 2020-4, Collingwood Charters Docking Lease Renewal. And 10.1.6 ICIP funding Fisherfield grant application. So I'll hand that over to you, Councillor Mcleod.
Thank you. I am not entirely sure what I am supposed to do now. I had a meeting with the clerk earlier today and haven't actually followed up on that. So am I supposed to be calling for votes, or what am I doing here, Sarah?
Sorry, just for clarification, if you have any of the items that you want to have any further discussion on that were discussed at the Corporate Community Services meeting, knowing that was from March the 2nd, and then the mayor will continue the dialogue with the rest of the members.
I see. Okay, so I do actually have 3 of these items that I would like to have comment on and ask some questions of the staff about, since it has been 7 weeks since that meeting. So I'm going to want to talk about 10.1.4 as well as 10.1.5 and 10.1.6. And so shall I just roll right into it?
I'm looking at the clerk for guidance here. I guess I would suggest you do that, and we can sever the items out. I guess the first question is, it's for comment only, or are you asking questions that we should pull these things because you want to change possibly the resolution?
I'm looking for some clarification from staff, because I'm pretty sure that things have changed in the last 7 weeks. Some things have happened in the world that might have an impact on some of these projects, and some of these reports may no longer be up to date.
All right, well, go ahead.
It has been 7 weeks since these reports were approved by the committee. So I think there will be some updates that we might want to look at from item 10.1.4, which is the Public Art Mural Commission on 28 Huron Street. And so my question is to the Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture. And in our last meeting, the special meeting that we had a week ago, the CIO told me that, or told us that all capital projects have been put on hold because of the pandemic and the uncertainty surrounding it. And I wonder, Director Culver, if you could tell me, because this is a capital project, the money's coming from the capital budget, what we are planning, what the plan is right now. I know you've got a lot on your plate, and we do appreciate your hard work. Can you tell me what's going on with this one?
Director Culver?
Thank you, Worship. So yeah, effectively this has been deferred for now, as have all capital projects. Staff across the corporation are going through a process of reviewing all capital projects to determine which can proceed and which can't or shouldn't. So this one is effectively deferred for now.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Director Culver. Don't go anywhere, Director Culver. So on item 10.1.5, my question on that is to do with something similar. Obviously, the docking lease and the things that are happening down in the waterfront, our launches are closed, and I'm suspecting that this lease, because it hasn't made it through, it made it through committee, but it hasn't been ratified here at council yet, is still is unsigned at this point. And are we thinking it will remain so?
You're correct that the lease remains unsigned pending council to final approval. However, it would be staff's advice to go ahead and sign the lease, as this is a long-term relationship. Certainly, the boat won't be entering the harbor until such time as it's permissible under the provincial regulations. But for right now, we're looking to take care of essentially the paperwork that we're required to have a long-term relationship with the tenant.
And so as a follow-up, Director Culver, so that would mean then if we're not going to sign this lease, then, or we are going to sign the lease, but are we planning to do what we have done with other, with our tax deferral and our wastewater and water deferrals and so on? Are we planning to defer receiving payment on this particular lease? Do we have to rewrite it? What has to happen here?
So through your worship, the payment structure with respect to the Huronic is that we receive a surcharge on all tickets that are sold. So effectively, it's automatically deferred until such time as they start selling tickets. So it was actually designed this way to help with the overhead cost of being in that location. And in this case, it actually helps as a bit of a relief because they're not having to pay to secure their spot and we're not having to waive any fees.
Thank you so much. I had forgotten that part of the, that detail, so I appreciate that help. And on item number 10.1.6 regarding Fisher Field, again, this is a capital project. And so I suspect that the contacts that you have at the province, I mean, it was 7 weeks ago that this happened, but I suspect that your contacts at the province are just as busy as our people are. And is there any reason to hope that we have any movement on this file? Have we heard anything?
And you're directing that question through me, Councillor Mcleod?
Yes, through you, your worship, to Director Culver.
Director Culver?
Yeah, through you, your worship. The so effectively, and it might as well, I might as well capture the three big projects that everyone's aware are ongoing in PRC. The Fisher Field Fieldhouse, the water play feature at Harborview Park, and the playground at Sunset Point are all effectively deferred. We're still doing background work to make sure that we're tender ready in some cases, or that the design work is proceeding, all the work that can be done from home. But in terms of capital expenses, at this point, we're not planning for the build until we know with more certainty what the timeline looks like.
And so just again, to clarify through, do I have to go through the mayor since I'm the chair of the committee? I thought okay. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to miss procedure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, in that situation, so no, you haven't heard from the province and
Sorry, thank you, your worship. I had neglected to mention, respond to that part of the question. So yeah, no, we have not heard from the province. It's been very difficult to get information, as you can imagine. They're consumed with current situations.
Right, as expected. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Except, of course, I have another one, as I always do. This one actually through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. So because there have been changes to these reports in the 7 weeks since they were approved by the committee, and here they are about to be ratified, do they need to be redone, or is there some procedural thing that has to take place with them?
Sarah?
Certainly. So we've had a brief conversation during our agenda review this afternoon, and a number of them are received for information and will basically remain on hold, but are ready to proceed should as soon as the pandemic is lifted. I'm not sure, through your worship, if you would like to add, or if CAO Min would like to add anything further to that discussion.
Fareed?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Your Worship. Just a couple of comments. I mean, Councillor Mcleod is correct in saying that the capital projects are on hold, but I think what Director Culver referred to is the fact that we're getting ready. And part of that is that if and when, well, it's not if, but when this pandemic is over and we're able to return to some sense of normalcy, the thinking is that these capital projects will be ready to, will be shovel ready. So we're doing all the background work. We're doing the tender if we need to do so. In some instances, we're reviewing tenders. We're putting these things out with the appropriate caveat, of course, to say that if these projects are canceled for whatever reason, we're not liable. But we're doing all of the preparatory work that needs to be done to get ready for implementation as soon as we are able to do so safely and in a responsible way. So a lot of the background work is being done. In that respect, to address Councillor Mcleod's question directly, I'm not sure we need to amend the report. The timelines may have shifted, and that's not unusual with capital projects, but I think the intent is still to proceed with this. just a matter of when we are able to execute it, and that's a bit unpredictable now because we can't look into the future and decide when the province might relax some of the rules regarding emergency considerations.
Thank you very much.
So if I can just get one point of clarification, since I've got the motion in front of me, with the capital project being, all capital projects being deferred for the moment, is 10.1.4 deferred, or by passing this motion now, does it, what impacts does it have on that particular project?
So through your worship, you're talking about the public art mural?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. The public art mural is essentially a process. We're going through the public art process. So this is just one benchmark within the process to inform council that we've arrived here. It's not, it doesn't determine the progress of the project. The project will still continue. There'll still be design work, etc. But again, we won't be able to apply the works until we're at such time as it's permissible to take on that after the restrictions are lifted.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Council, any questions? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pull 10.1.3 Community Safety Wellbeing Plan update for discussion. And I have a question, actually two questions through you to Executive Director Skinner in that regard. And I'm looking under the parameters under which this plan will be designed. The first one is social development, and it alludes to factors that will be monitored and evaluated as we measure our well-being, our well-beingness. There's a number of factors, but what may be missing in my view is transportation. We talk about housing, we talk about education. Sorry, I guess I better get the thing open. Employment, income, housing. What we don't talk about is transportation. And I know in a couple of jurisdictions in the US that this does figure very prominently into measurements of community well-being, in that, as an example, employment is important, but employment is not practical if the individual doesn't have a means of getting to that employment. And oftentimes public transportation, of course, but also active transportation vehicles, so that the person can get to their employment by means that would be completely free to them, which would be, i.e., by bicycle. So I'm wondering if that is a parameter that could be added under that item, and that would be through you to Director Skinner.
Thank you. Sonia.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. This is good timing for getting some feedback on the factors that were proposed by the consultant. We've had one meeting of the work group, which was very productive. It involved largely the CAOs of or someone like the fire chief of the 4 municipalities, as well as the director from the county and the consultant. And we gave the consultant a few comments back on the indicators, and I think there's still an opportunity to make some suggestions both on the indicators themselves, and then as they start to provide us with the results from the indicators, what the gaps are that will be important to Collingwood. So I'll provide some feedback on the transportation. I hadn't noticed that one until you mentioned it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then through you, my second question to Director Skinner. The legislation, Bill 175, unfortunately, from municipal viewpoint, is yet another download of responsibility from the province to the municipal level. And I'm wondering if the province intends to assist in funding for these programs.
Sonia?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Well, that's a very good question. To date, there has not been any commitment that there will be funding for the community safety and well-being plans. So it's interesting, as many of the components of the plans will involve working collaboratively with our social services organizations, mental health, housing, many other factors. And I think it's going to be very important that we remain aligned with our county counterparts, because they're providing a number of these services. We may wish, as we go forward with the plans, to talk with the province. It is quite unusual in a sense that these plans specifically need to be approved by the local municipal government, so you. However, many of the considerations within the plans fall under the accountabilities or responsibilities of others. However, on the flip side of that, you are the closest to the people in Collingwood. And if we're looking at what the gaps are in Collingwood and where we need to understand and call for resources, you're very well placed to be setting out the parameters of those plans. So there's dual considerations here, but you have also pointed out a good point around having these plans done at the local level, and then having a limited number of levers that you as a council can pull to change things around the services that are being planned for.
Councillor Doherty, any follow-up?
I guess as follow-up, my only comment would be that, and I'm sure that the task force will do this, to keep a close watch on what potential additional costs may start funneling down to the municipalities, and be proactive to approach the appropriate ministries to make sure that municipalities are not out of pocket. It's a great initiative, but it's yet another cost potentially to our taxpayers. Those are my questions. Thank you.
So noted. Any other comments or questions, Council? Councillor Hamlin?
Yes, there's two items that I'm interested on the list. One is this very one that Councillor Doherty has just been speaking about, the community safety and well-being plan. I'm also concerned about the funding of the program that will fall out of this, given that our proportion of property taxes for social services does go to the county. But I was happy to hear Executive Director Skinner's response to that, and I can see that she has her eye on the ball on this one. My second question with respect to this is, I have noticed that the legislation does not require us to jointly do such a plan, but it allows us to do so. And it doesn't say we have to do it by county or otherwise. Luckily, I guess in some ways, Simcoe County's come forward for with the funding for a consultant to do this plan. And they have put us into a geographical grouping that includes Wasaga Beach, Clearview, and Springwater, assuming that those are the areas that we would have the most in common with in creating such a plan. So my question is revolving around the fact that the planning support, and I'm reading from Executive Director Skinner's report. She mentions that this planning supports a multi-sectoral approach to addressing local priorities, and that we have to look at a community where citizens feel safe, have a sense of belonging, access to services, where individuals and families able to meet needs for education, healthcare, food, housing, income, and social and cultural expression. Now, I raise this because our municipality on our western border is one of those communities that relies on Collingwood, and very much so for the provision of social supports, the high schools, medical care, the hospital, recreation facilities, the list would go on and on. But all of these things that the province tells us we should be having regard to. My thought was we should be looking to the west to have some discussions about doing joint planning, because we're so integrated, not just with them and with Saga Beach and possibly Clearview. So I wanted to ask Executive Director Skinner what her thoughts were on my question.
Sure. And before I put that over to Sonia, just to back up the comment on the county. Of the county's $550 million budget, 30% comes from municipal taxes and 70% comes from the provincial government and federal government to a lesser degree for flow-through programs. So the affordable housing complex at $40 million that was just built in our community was done by the county with some of those flow-through monies. And I know we are going to be working very closely with the town of Blue Mountains on some of this wellness plan because of our association with the Police Services Board, and I'll pass it over to Director Skinner to fill that in.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Hamlin. Yes, we have had some good discussions, particularly at a joint Police Services Board with the town of Blue Mountains. In part, the provincial legislative trigger for requiring these community safety and well-being plans is about items that shouldn't end up with the police getting caught far before people find the police or emergency services at their door in the middle of the night for something that perhaps they could have received supports on, weeks, months, or years before that. I have been in contact both with the consultant that's doing the Grey Bruce plan, including Town of the Blue Mountains, and as recently as today with the CAO at the Town of Blue Mountains, talking about our intentions to collaborate on the plans. So both of our communities, there's a county-wide approaches being taken, but we've built time into the process so that we can have a conversation at the end and some time throughout, so that we definitely look west as much as or periodically, maybe not as much as we're looking east because of those Simcoe County and funding considerations, but we want to look west as well. And that was a very good point for our plan. Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you. That's that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Comey, you had your hand up.
Oh,
Councillor Hamlin, we can't hear you.
okay, sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. On this list from this Community and Social Services, I also wanted to speak to item 10.1.5.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. This is the item that refers to the lease renewal of the Huronic Charter. And let me just get my note here. I wanted to know, I wanted to separate out, there's two recommendations on the staff report. The first one is to approve the renewal of the docking lease. And the second one is to confirm the delegated authority for all harbor docking arrangements to the Director of Parks and Rec. And I particularly wanted to focus my concern with respect to the delegated authority. And I appreciate, and I did speak to Director Culver about this, I appreciate the business nature of this and how in some ways it seems maybe more technical than others. But my concern through you, Mr. Mayor, and I wanted to ask the director further on this topic, is as we develop currently the boat is situate on the promenade, on the west side of the promenade. And the whole harborfront area from, I'll say, the east side of the promenade through to Heritage Way still remains to be developed. And there could be a lot of movement of facilities and perhaps in the fullness of time, it will make sense for this boat to be docked somewhere else. I think it's something that none of us can see right now. And I'm just wondering whether there could be some input from council at that future time when we're looking at a more fulsome build out of the harbor, where we should have some input from council and perhaps the public on where this boat should end up.
Yeah, I'll pass that to Director Culver. It is a 5-year lease, and I'm not sure we're going to be that far through our harbor planning by that time, but Director Culver?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. From the way I understand the agreement and the way the agreement was structured, ultimately, if council has an opinion about any part of it, including termination of the lease with 90 days notice, that's absolutely within the right of council as the executive of the corporation. So there's nothing in here, including the delegation, that would stop council from determining a different course at any point through the contract.
Does that assist, Councillor Hamlin?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Comey.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it'll be through you to Director Culver, but I appreciate that you did bring this up for clarification. I'm just taking us back to 10.1.4, which is the public art mural. And I'm so glad to hear, again, through you to Director Culver, if I'm understanding correctly, this particular project is inching forward. And then to finish out my thought, the reason I'm excited about that here is there's an opportunity for the finalists to see some money. So the shortlisted artists will be compensated $550 for each for their participation. And then the final artist will see $20,000. And we know that includes their design, research, production, administration. And I noticed there are some municipalities during this time using art as an opportunity to get some money out into the community. And we just happen to have one in the works here. To be honest, I'd love to see a ton more, as I'd paint every laneway at this time and brighten up our community and lift spirits and get some money out to our local artists who I can't imagine how much they are suffering at this time with all the galleries closed. But could you kindly clarify how this project is inching along?
Director Culver?
Yeah, through your worship. So we're in the shortlisting phase. So the finalists have been awarded the smaller amount of money, albeit a developed designs that they would present for final selection. And I should make note that the final amount, the $20,000 plus that Councillor Comey had mentioned, includes materials as well. We've taken on the shipping and mounting component of it, but the artist will have to be responsible for materials as well as all their labor costs, etc. I also will take the because since Councillor Comey sort of set it up well, that we are actually looking at a project right now to help up to 5 local artists participate in an art project in cooperation streetcar development along First Street, or Huron Street, I should say. And I intended to send an email to council today on that, and busyness of things neglected, but you'll have received an email tonight, and there'll be some announcements going forward about developing some support for artists in the shorter term as well.
Good news. Thank you. Councillor Comey, any follow-up?
No, just that's absolutely fantastic. So just to clarify, and I hope I didn't miss it, but there's a good chance I have in this crazy world. Director Culver, through you, Mr. Mayor, are those finalists, did those art things make it up onto Engage Collingwood, the 3 finalists?
No, the process doesn't have it going public until we create a final, get a final decision made by the ad hoc committee. So it wasn't a part of Engage at all.
Oh, okay, but we have picked, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 3 people, 3 local artists have received $550 as part of this program.
Three finalists, I believe it was 3 finalists have received money in order to help them spend the time to develop the designs that will be selected.
Okay, awesome news. So cool. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Director Culver.
Council, any other questions? Then we'll proceed to call the vote then. And I'll start with you, Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty,
In favor?
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor Hall
In favor?
and Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Someone's banging on my window, literally. Councillor Comey.
In favor.
All right, that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Next up, we have the ICIP funding Fisherfield grant application. No, sorry. We have the bylaw 10.2.1, and that is the bylaw number 2020-14, being a bylaw to establish a Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee, be enacted and passed this 20th day of April 2020. The bylaw was included in the staff report for C20-3, and that is moved by Councillor Mcleod and seconded by Councillor Comey. Any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'm starting with Councillor Doherty.
In favor?
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor,
In favor?
Councillor Mcleod,
In favor.
Councillor Comey,
In favor.
and Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
And that is carried unanimously. Now we're at 10.3, Strategic Initiative Standing Committee. So the first item up, and these will be moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and Councillor Mcleod. Be it resolved that Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 4, 2020, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. 10.3.1, T2020-3 Municipal Modernization Projects, T-3-2, T2020-4 Council Remuneration, and T.3.3 Integrity Commissioners Annual Report. Council, questions or comments on these items? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I guess I would have questions and or comments with respect to 10.3.1 on the municipal modernization and 10.3.2. On the first one, on municipal modernization projects, I think very similar to Councillor Mcleod's question with respect to the other reports. Is this still realistic in the current environment and the priorities that staff would see us maintaining in terms of our ability to be creative with that funding, as it wasn't targeted to anything specific?
We'll look to the CAO. Fareed.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Jeffrey. That's an important consideration for us. When the modernization projects were placed before a standing committee, times were different. We're dealing with different circumstances today. So one option would be for us to look at whether council would like us to come back with these projects when we're ready to bring back to council for its consideration the full impact of the COVID-19 on the municipal budget. So rather than foreclosing that option now and spending this money, one option would be for you to consider this funding within the context of the broader conversation.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. And I think I would like in the appropriate format to propose that we then refer it back to staff.
I'll look to the clerk. Should we just pull this report from this motion, Sarah, and deal with it separately?
I think that would be ideal through your worship to council.
Okay, so what I'll do right now is just pull that item 10.3.1 from this motion and we'll deal with it separately. Councillor Jeffrey, I'll come back to you at that point in time and you can make your motion and we'll get a seconder at that point in time.
Okay.
So then dealing with the remaining reports 10.3.2 and 10.3.3, are there any comments or questions from council? Councillor Jeffrey, you had your
Sorry,
hand.
Mayor Saunders. I just did have questions and I apologize for this, but I was at FCM meetings for this Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, so I missed the opportunity to be able to ask. With respect to the daily per diems for council members. I know way back in 2010, we used to have these daily per diems, but those were foregone when we made a motion to forego payments or honorariums for committees. So I guess for me, this becomes very difficult because politically we have our county reps who get paid for FCM and AMOs and such conferences through the county money. So it doesn't appear in their reports of spending. And even though we had that motion, the NVCA reps were allowed to continue to collect their funding as far as I can recall. And so politically, if everybody isn't going to claim these, and then there's only some who do, it's really awkward. I don't see the point. Number one, I forfeit 4 weeks of billable hours to do FCM, but that would add another $1,600 to that FCM budget if I did it. And I just was a little confused about what we were trying to accomplish with that per diem for council members and how we could actually ensure that there was some kind of equal treatment of it. So that everybody in their unique situations weren't put, say, at jeopardy in the public eye. I mean, because rightly so, we're very transparent in our reporting, but sometimes it just doesn't look very equal in black and white on paper.
Yeah, we'll look either to the CEO or the treasurer. Fareed, do you want to take that, or Marjorie?
I mean, I can begin the response and through your worship, and Marjorie can continue. I think part of the deliberation in bringing forward his report was to recognize and address some of the exact issues that Councillor Jeffrey has raised. And I think what we're trying to do is somehow level the playing field, but I don't think we got it right. And part of that consideration was to ensure that how we allocate budget for things that might be common across the organization, for things like FCM and AMO and that sort of stuff, we may want to look at whether or not we take that money from council's budget, or we set aside an amount on an annual basis upon which council can draw from. So it's not reflected in your annual budget, because indeed, in my view, those are professional development type of initiatives, AMO conference and FCM conference, or indeed some of the developmental opportunity that you may want to access should perhaps come from a common budget rather than an individual member's budget. So I posit that for consideration, and I think it will take us maybe one more budget cycle to kind of rectify some of this. Okay. But I'll ask the treasurer to offer any additional comment that she might have.
Through you, your worship, I think that the CAO has summed it up quite well. Those are budget considerations that when we get ready to do the 2021 budget, it can be discussed and put forward at that time, which we will also have a better idea as well where we're standing in terms of what's happened with COVID and what direction we're going. So we can discuss it for the 2021 budget.
And just for clarity, then is it staff's suggestion that the current report go through as is with the caveat that it will be re-examined during the budget process, or are we pulling it at this time for future consideration?
Through you, your worship, those items are now history, and we actually did have a deadline to have it posted on the website by March 31st. However, during this pandemic, I kind of think we would have a little bit of leeway to get it up there, but there won't be any real changes to it this year. And we have already done the individual sheets, detailed sheets that we will be posting on the website as well.
Right, then I will take it. We will leave that on the list on the understanding that these issues will be addressed in the upcoming budget discussions.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Jeffrey, those were your two items?
Thank you very much. They were.
Right, and I think I have Councillor Doherty next. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm not sure now that we have deferred the item, which is the municipal modernization projects, whether I can or should still make comment. But I did have concern about one of the proposed expenditures.
So
And
Councillor Doherty, I've pulled that item, so we'll have that discussion under a separate heading.
Okay.
So for the purposes of this, we're just dealing with 10.3.2 or 10.3.3.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Hamlin, I think I saw your hand up. Do you have comments about these latter two items, 10.3.2 or 10.3.3?
No.
Okay. Councillor Comey, I had you as down as well. Do you have comments on the latter two items?
I do not. They were related to modernization. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Just further to the comments of Councillor Jeffrey, which I agree with, specific to 10.3.2. It is correct, and for public's interest, some of the expenses that the other 7 around the table would expense, whether it be AMO or an FCM conference, you and I, as our two representatives of the county, have the opportunity to expense the county. And I don't have an issue of going forward. For example, there was maybe an asterisk to the report that made that denote, that those monies were spent at the county level. Twofold. One, because I think I share, I hope I share, universally around the table that attending some of these conferences and functions, whether they be 1, 2, 3, or simply an afternoon or whatever the case may be, are important. Important for our own continuing education, but important for the community as a whole. And so I have no issue in letting people know that I've attended something, what the cost is, and that the monies were spent. And it is something that it's just the way it's been reported over the years, a bit of an oddity. And so I would concur with Councillor Jeffrey as it relates to how it's not, it shows an imbalance because if you look at the monies that were spent by me last year, I'm under, I think I'm $100 or something like that. And that is not accurate when you take into what I spent at the county.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions, Council, about the latter items, 10.3.2 or 10.3.3? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I might not have a question, just a clarification. When the treasurer says that this will all be looked after before the next budget, does that include right down to the end of the paragraph that we debated at the last meeting about the 15% above limit that's allocated? If it is going to be looked into, then I have no questions, and if it isn't, then I just have a comment.
Marjorie.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, in time for the 2021 budget, all of these items can be discussed in the formats put in place in the way that the council members want.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Mcleod, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I was happy with the changes that I saw in this report from when it came first to strategic initiatives and when it came today. And I quite like the format that the Appendix D, and it seems as though if it were filled out the way that it ought to be filled out, that there can be no question where our taxpayers' money is going when it is being spent on us. So thank you and good work.
Thank you for that. Seeing no other comments, then I'm going to call the vote, and we're receiving these two reports, which are 10.3.2 T2020-4 Council Remuneration and T.3.3 Integrity Commissioner's Annual Report. And I'm starting with you, Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin?
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod?
In favor.
Councillor Comey?
In favor.
Councillor Madigan?
In favor.
And Councillor Doherty?
In favor.
That is passed unanimously. So now we have out of this report, 10.3.1, T 2020-3. Councillor Jeffrey, you asked it to be pulled. Do you have any amendment that you're proposing?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I would like to refer the Municipal Modernization Projects report back to staff, looking through the current environment and of COVID and the impact on us. So.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder and then we'll get the discussion going. Councillor Doherty, I've got you down as the seconder. Questions or comments, Council? Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
Thank you. And I seconded the motion because I do heartily agree with Councillor Jeffrey that based on what has transpired over the last 6 weeks, that we may want to take a look at the allocation of these funds. But I did in particular want to express concern about the allocation of funding specifically to the repatriation of water and wastewater billing back to the municipality. And I'm concerned for two reasons. First of all, because it is an exceptionally large expense, although that cost has not been finalized. And secondly, because we haven't had the opportunity to work with EPCOR to see if there are ways in which we can address our concerns relative to the overall cost and our ability to control and react to arrears. So I would like to see that kind of discussion take place before we would consider removing the billing of those services back to the municipality.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Doherty. And we did have our EPCOR bilateral meeting today, and that issue was raised. So I think it's something that the CAO is aware of, and I'll just look to you, Fareed, to input there. But that we had discussed other options with EPCOR, and so there's we're exploring other. Well, we're starting a discussion, I think, and so maybe Fareed, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Doherty. I mean, I think this will be brought forward to Council with a bit of business case, and part of that business case will be to work with EPCOR to see if there are things that they can do to help address some of the current concerns that we have. So Marjorie and staff will be working collaboratively with staff from EPCOR to work through some of the challenges that we have and see if there's a way forward. I mean, a couple of the considerations that are top of mind for us, one is our ability to collect arrears. And the way how meters are allocated. The third issue that I raised as well, and Marjorie is fully aware of this, is the issue around moving towards more of a paperless billing system. That's the future, and you know, we're heading in that direction. So one of the things I'd like us to look at is our ability to move not only on the water and wastewater side, but also on the other services that we provide. And I don't want us to be impacted by a third party in our ability to move those things along. So we will have a conversation with EPCOR to try and work through some of these issues. And when this matter is brought back to council, it will have the benefit of those considerations.
Thank you, Fareed. Thanks, Councillor Doherty. I see Councillor Madigan, and then I've got Councillor Mcleod and Councillor Hamlin. And Councillor Comey, I saw you. So go ahead, Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My question will be through you to whoever you tell me it's going to be. Can we get a definition of any limitations where this money could or could not be spent, Your Worship?
Okay, I'll start with the CAO, Fareed.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Madigan, you're referring to the modernization fund that we received from the province, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you. And through Your Worship again, yeah, there was no specific condition attached to the fund. It was unconditional funding, but I think one of the expectation is that we'll use it to enhance efficiency and promote modernization. So we'll have to see how we square those two considerations with whatever other considerations we bring to council come whenever this matter comes back before council. Part of the consideration, I think, would be that because we're in extraordinary circumstances, the province might not be as stringent in terms of how they apply that efficiency and modernization lens. But I think that's one thing we have to be cognizant of, and we'll do some work with the province to sort through some of those issues before we bring this matter back to council. But you're absolutely right. While there were no conditions attached to the money, the expectation is that the money would be used for modernization and to enhance efficiency across the organization. Councillor Madigan.
Does that assist, Councillor Madigan?
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there anything maybe from finance side that could be added to that?
And Marjorie, is there anything you want to add to that answer?
Through you, Your Worship, we have been in discussions with the province. The province has called me twice to find out which direction we were going in terms of where we were going to use those funds, because they've basically said, you know, you need to look at service delivery, you need to look at service reviews, shared service agreements, or capital investments that will in the future reduce internal costs or provide efficiencies or customer service delivery enhancements for the community. So that's it.
Thanks, Marjorie. Councillor Madigan?
No, thank you. That's a great comment. So as per what our CAO said, with hopes that the province will maybe lift any stringency that they might have had in these pandemic times. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mcleod?
Thank you. I'm going to support Councillor Jeffrey's motion to refer this back to staff, but not perhaps for the reasons that she has delineated. And I have I was going to ask for this to be referred back to staff regardless of COVID, because I feel as though there's been a lot of confusion about this money, which we received more than a year ago, and which I believe during the budget process we were told was not unconditional. It had to be used for certain things, and I have a whole lot of questions about this funding and its impact on the budget, and the fact that the minutes from our last meeting say that the report says the town is suggesting, the minutes, suggesting to use the government allocated funds for budget approved projects and then keep the budgeted money in reserves, which to me is a rewriting of the budget. So I'm very happy to support this referral, but perhaps not for the reasons of the pandemic. Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question through you is to the clerk. I'm wondering, by referring this matter, like the report itself, I should start, is really just for council's information only, and describes a few ways that the funds could be applied to what I believe are existing budget items. And I wanted to make sure if this matter is just referred back, given that it's only an informational report, that it would mean, because this is what I would like it to mean, is that none of the modernization funds would be spent without prior council approval. And the reason I ask that is if that's not what it means, then I would like to suggest we have more specific wording.
Clerk Almas?
Sorry, through your worship, to either CAO Amin or Treasurer Leonard, this is their report, and if that's technically what the intent is, I guess further clarification from them would be needed before I could make a decision.
Okay, CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Hamlin. I mean, if the expectation is that this report be referred back to staff, I don't expect we will spend any of the money unless we bring back a report to council for its approval and consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Comey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I think I appreciate Councillor Jeffrey's insight into deferring it as or referring it, as well as Councillor Mcleod. That was an excellent point. Something that just jumped out at me so much in the report was the front counter redesign, especially in light of COVID. I mean, here one vision might have been to do it one certain way, and perhaps in light of our new normal, it's going to have to be something completely different. But while we're on the subject of modernization, and if we're looking at it through that sort of technical lens, it was actually Councillor Jeffrey, and it's so piqued interest at the end of last meeting, you sort of floated this notion of Wi-Fi, right? And the need for a public. So I'm just putting out there for staff consideration when this goes back. Of course, we have in building, but for the consideration of things like hotspots and perhaps a network or a broader range of that Wi-Fi availability. And I think there's some county discussion happening around that as well. So I just wanted to put that out there for staff to digest. I thought it was great that Councillor Jeffrey brought that up lightly at the last meeting. So thank you for letting me share my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. Any other comments or questions, Council, before we call the vote? So I guess the wording, Sarah, is that the Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 4, 2020, and refer item 10.3.1 T2020-3 Municipal Modernization Project back to staff for reconsideration, or what would the wording be there, Sarah? Review? Sorry, you're gonna have to unmute.
I should know better above all. Sorry, through your worship to members of council, I have it recorded that it be referred back to staff for the review based on the COVID budget analysis.
Yeah, I think Councillor Mcleod had some other items in there. So Councillor Mcleod, do you have any suggestion for the wording?
No, I'm happy with the wording as long as what I had to say goes in the minutes, please.
All right, I think that's duly noted. So with that being the motion on the floor, I will start with Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I'm in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
And Councillor Berman.
In favor.
That is passed unanimously. Over the page, that takes us to motions. Item 12, 12.1, motion National Volunteer Recognition Week. And it is moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and seconded by Councillor Mcleod. Be it resolved that staff report. No, have I got the wrong one?
Yeah, I'm wondering if are we looking at the fees and service charges?
Yeah, we're skipping the staff report.
Oh, my apologies. 10.4. So we're at item 10.4.1 T2020-2 2020 fees and service charges. And the motion is that be it resolved that staff report T2020-2 recommending council enact and pass a bylaw to approve the 2020 fees and service charges as attached be approved. We've got that on the floor. Are there any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? I see none. So I'm going to call the vote then, starting with Councillor Jeffrey again.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
And that is passed unanimously. Bylaws, item 10.5. Item 10.5.1, that bylaw number bylaw number 2020-15 being a bylaw to approve the fees and service charges for 2020 be enacted and passed this 20th day of April 2020. And that is moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and seconded by Councillor Mcleod. We've been through this. Are there any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, we will start with you, Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor,
In favor?
Councillor Mcleod,
I think it's the cat's pajamas. In favor.
Deb, is your cat wearing pajamas? Councillor Comey,
For
In
day
favor.
pajamas.
Councillor Madigan,
In favor.
Councillor Doherty,
In favor.
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
and Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
That is carried unanimously. So now that does bring us to motions and the National Volunteer Recognition Week. So it's moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Whereas 12.7 million Canadian volunteers give their time to help others, contributing close to 2 billion volunteer hours per year. And whereas volunteers in Collingwood mentor our children, feed our hungry, comfort our lonely, beautify our green spaces, share their expertise with committees and boards, help our library grow, and fundraise for our charitable organizations. And whereas the collective result of the work done by our town's volunteers is that Collingwood is a more desirable place to live. And whereas the town of Collingwood relies on numerous volunteers on our committees and boards, helping our library, museum, trails, assisting at municipal events, and participating in various programs and services that are fundamental to the health and prosperity of our municipality. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood do hereby proclaim April 19th to 25th, 2020 as National Volunteer Week and urge our fellow citizens and organizations to recognize the crucial role played by volunteers in our community. Councillor, any comments or questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'll start with me, and I support this wholeheartedly. Deputy Mayor.
I support this as well.
Councillor Mcleod.
I support this.
Councillor Comey.
Support.
Councillor Madigan.
I'm in favor of it.
Councillor Doherty.
In support.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
And Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
That is passed unanimously. A big thanks to all of our volunteers. 12.2, disclosure of the 2019 itemized council expenses. This is a motion that was provided by Councillor Mcleod. I'll read it in, Councillor Mcleod, and then I'll hand it over to you. So it's moved by Councillor Mcleod and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved, whereas council is considering, has approved a policy regarding the requirement of itemized council expense, public disclosure in the interest of transparency and accountability. Therefore, be it resolved, the council herein further requests that the 2019 council expenses also be disclosed in an itemized manner and posted on the town's website, in addition to the statutory expense reporting requirements. Councillor Mcleod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this motion is pretty much self-explanatory. I think that transparency and accountability are both good things, and I can't imagine there's anyone on this council who has got anything to hide in their expenses for 2019, and therefore I'll be asking for a recorded vote.
All right. Any other comments or questions, Council? Councillor Berman.
Thank you. Just a clarification, I guess, through to the treasurer, I'm assuming, where it says on part 2, itemized manner, that could be taken a number of different ways. And I know that at the previous meetings, what we talked about and what I hoped maybe you could confirm was the itemized ways was the 3 sheets that we all had. It was the Town of Collingwood mileage claim. And then it was just photocopies of the receipts that we submitted to the town. Is that what you had in mind in itemized manner?
Are you asking Councillor Mcleod, or are you asking for clarification from the treasurer?
Clarification, I guess, from the treasurer, because that's what I would like to see. And if that's what she intended through that wording, that's fine with me.
Through you, your worship. I believe at the last meeting that we had decided to take the statutory form the way that I had it, the individual sheets that we had sent out to each councillor to get them to their satisfaction. And we would post those on the website this year, whereas with 2020 numbers, we would start putting the expense vouchers behind them as well.
So what you're saying is what I've just held up is what's going to show up next year at this time?
Well, I guess there's just clarification. So you're talking about the statutory expense reporting, Councillor Berman, or what shows up on the town website?
I'm talking about what shows up on the town website. So the statutory reporting was going up anyhow, and Councillor Mcleod's motion is to ask for more detail to go up. So I'm just asking for clarification on what that itemized manner means.
Through you, Your Worship, for this year, the itemized manner does not include copies of your receipts.
Right.
2020, or what year is this? I've been working on the year end. I don't remember. For 2020, those items will be posted on the website with your approved expenditures behind it.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'll look for anyone else before I come back to you, Councillor Mcleod. Is there anyone else that has a question or comment? Seeing none, Councillor Mcleod.
With respect, that is not what I intended with this motion. What I intended with this motion is that what's going to appear every year henceforth is what will appear for year 2019.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's clarification then for Councillor Berman. So the motion that is on the floor is asking for a continuation of the type of disclosure that went on the website in 2019. Councillor Mcleod?
No, Your Worship. What I am asking for is that what is about to happen for the year 2020, which has been outlined in our expense report, which is the sheets of paper that Councillor Berman has displayed, are also the reporting that will take place for 2019. I want to see all of it from everybody. It's not starting in 2020, starting in 2019.
Excuse me, Your Worship, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
This will take a significantly longer period of time because of the social distancing and the COVID protocols that we have in place now at the town hall. We cannot have more than one person in an area at a time. So Karen will have to coordinate with the other people that come in to get those expense vouchers, receipts, whatever they are, before you put them out. So I can't tell you when they'll be on the website.
With that being said, can you clarify that the 2019 expenses will at some point in time include the supporting documentation? That will be updated at some point in the future, I guess, is the consideration I'm hearing.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, we can have it done as soon as the social distancing and the COVID protocols are relaxed.
Clerk has her hand up. Sarah?
Certainly, through your worship to members of council, in particular Councillor Mcleod, as this was her notice of motion and moving forward, that was how we had prepared it, understanding that it would go forward in 2020, but 19 we would do the same. The only clarification piece that I was wondering is it wasn't the intent to post every single receipt, just the detailed form that was normally submitted. Is that still the intent?
Councillor Mcleod?
The intent is to have as much transparency and accountability for the year 2019 as there will be for the year 2020 and 21 and 2022. So, and we have had this conversation regarding how much time it may take to happen. And I'm, if it happens before the next election, that might be okay.
Well, I think Treasurer Leonard said that would happen. Councillor Jeffrey, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to know as well the level of responsibility of staffing. I travel quite a bit and use my own personal cards and information. Does that mean those all have to be redacted by staff before they get posted on a public website?
Marjorie, Treasurer, I guess if there's invoices, you could just redact the number, but beyond that, if you're relying on statements, I'll look to the Treasurer.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, those items would have to be redacted, preserve the privacy of the council member.
Councillor Comey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. You know, it's crossed my mind sitting here in my office that maybe individual members of council can be of assistance. I don't know how everybody does their personal business life, but I'm going to make this assumption that everybody has a file, that they've put their council related expenses in and the expense report, that they made a copy of the receipts for themselves and stapled it to the expense report, and could perhaps greatly assist the treasurer by simply compiling this report, throw it on your scanner, hit PDF and send it to her best you can, is just the suggestion I'm floating to my fellow councillors who I'm sure want to participate the best they can in the intent and exercise that Councillor Mcleod has proposed.
Okay, clerk, you had your hand up.
Certainly, just to clarify, as the administrative assistant to clerk services that supports council, she was instrumental in preparing this, and she will be assisting all members of council in preparing enough information to be as transparent as possible, and she'll be working with all members of council in the Treasury Department.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mcleod?
I have no more things to say other than I ask for a recorded vote.
Yeah, okay, your square lit up. That's what I was wondering. It's like, what was that thing? Councillor Jeffrey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was only going to respond through to Councillor Comey that going forward, we can assist, we provide all the copies of our invoices, but I can't go back to 2019. They have them all. I don't keep copies here. So short of going in and redacting my numbers out of my own reports, I don't know how I can assist in the meantime, but going forward, quite happy to do so.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to the clerk for the recorded vote. Sarah?
Okay, so I will begin with Councillor Hamlin. Okay, I take that as in favor. Okay, Councillor Jeffrey.
Oh, in favor. Sorry, I can't hear you, Sarah.
Sorry, I'm kind of, I've got two different computer screens going here. Sorry, Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
In favor.
Mayor Saunderson.
In favor.
Perfect. Motion is carried, unanimous.
So item 12.3, the endorsement of the National Tribute to Frontline Volunteers. This was a motion that was tabled by Councillor Hamlin at the last meeting. I'll read it in and then I will pass it over to Councillor Hamlin.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'm in fact was hoping I could ask for this to be deferred until our next council meeting.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? And it's Councillor Doherty. So I've got to call the vote for the deferral. So I'll start with Councillor Mcleod. In favor.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I'm in favor. Deputy Mayor. Sorry, Casey, I'll have to unmute.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. So that's deferred to the next council meeting.
I'm gonna make them up some signs for next time.
So
Oh, I've got signs.
13.1,
Oh, you got the count.
the dedicated gas tax funding allocation. Moved by Councillor Comey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall.
Sorry, there's one.
You missed one. 12.4.
Oh, sorry, 12.4.
Yeah, now how would you like me to leave and know when to come back?
Yeah, so Sarah, can you provide some guidance on that, please?
Certainly, through your worship, to Councillor Berman, I just recommend leaving the room and being outside of the picture.
Okay.
All right. Item 12.4 is moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Collingwood hear and approve funding up to $100,000 from the COVID-19 Contingency Fund to support the Collingwood General Marine Hospital in preparations for an off-site location to be activated if a surge of inpatient volumes outstrips the expanded internal capacity of the CGMH during this current pandemic, and for future disaster preparedness use on a cost-sharing basis. Maybe before we call the vote, I'll look to the CAO just to give some background, please, Fareed.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to members of council. This has been another attempt by us to work with the local hospital to try and advance their preparedness in the event that we have to use a facility beyond the current hospital. And you've seen the email, and one of the options we're looking at is a facility off-site. And there are two objectives here. One is to triage non-COVID related patients to this facility if required, or the other option would be to actually use it as a dedicated facility for COVID related issues. And I use that word issues deliberatively because I think there are some considerations here beyond illness that they're looking at for this facility. So the hospital has made a request for us to support the funding of this. There is a COVID-related Ministry of Health funding that's available, but it's unclear as to what projects would be eligible for accessing this fund. So that's one consideration. And the second consideration is that I think it's good to have some redundancy in our emergency planning process. So that I think it would be good for us to have more than simply one emergency operations center. So this would be an alternate site to the current site that we have. So I would sort of leave council with those two considerations. I suspect if, for example, the hospital were to receive money from the province to fund this, that we could look at whether or not we want to offset our contribution through other funding arrangements that we contemplate having with the hospital. But I think the more important consideration for us, in addition to COVID related, is the issue of having an alternate emergency operations center in the event that we need it. So I will leave those comments and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council questions, Councillor Mcleod.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to the CAO. I have several questions about this, and the first one is that is this that are we dealing with a confidential location? Can we say what it is that we're talking about here?
Well, the location isn't made public, so I would defer that to the hospital to make that information public.
Is it confidential what it is that we are being asked to help purchase?
Agreed.
No, I think what it is, that's not confidential.
Super. So through you, Your Worship, who's going to own this generator once the pandemic is over and we cost share it with the hospital? Is it ours? Is it theirs?
That is one of those agreements that we'll look to some direction from council for. If it is an alternate site that we will house our emergency occupation center, I suspect we'll have to have some ability to exercise our rights in that regard. So a co-ownership or shared ownership is not beyond the realm of possibility.
Thank you. Is work already being done on this site through you, Your Worship, to the CAO?
Yes, we've begun to do some preparatory work. The extent of physical work on site, I can't speak to that, but I know that we've had lots of discussions with various parties to begin to get ready. But whether or not there's actual work on site, Chief Ross Parr might be able to provide some clarity in that regard, but there's a lot of preparatory work happening behind the scenes.
So through you, Your Worship, to Chief Parr, is there work taking place on site to make this happen?
Through you, your worship, at this time, what's been taking place is more tender processes and review of what needs to be done. There's been review of hospital staff, and certain doctors at the hospital have approved with the ministry the site can be used for what was proposed for the COVID situation. There's been a lot of positive talk with community partners, for example, EPCOR, about costing, which I think some of the costing is coming down, as I understood, as late as this afternoon. But there hasn't been physical work done, but there's a lot of prep work to know what needs to be done to go forward as quick as they can.
Thank you, Chief Parr. And through you, your worship, to the CAO, is the spot where we're at in the conversation with the hospital regarding the site? Do we know for sure that the owners of the building are in a position to say yes to this type of activity?
Through your worship, I haven't been involved in those negotiations, but I suspect the corporation would not have advanced the conversation to this extent had they not have some kind of assurance from the owners that this would be an appropriate site.
And I guess if we can just add to that, judging from the email that we received from the CEO of the hospital asking for this, they've already, to my knowledge, have already been in discussions with the Legion about the use of the facility, and it was through the appraisal of the use of the facility that the issue came up with respect to the need for the generator backup.
Terrific, thank you. And through you, your worship, one more to the CAO. Well, maybe more than one. How many dollars are we talking about here? I understand what I read in the email, but in the conversations that are being had with the hospital, how many dollars are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about up to 100,000. It could potentially be between 75 and 100, or it could be less. I guess we wouldn't know for sure unless we go through the procurement process, but the intention would be to cost share. And what we've done is we're requesting an amount of up to give us the flexibility to be able to provide the requisite support within that ceiling.
And through your worship to the CAO, where is it that we're planning on taking this money from? Are we thinking of taking it from the $2.5 million emergency contingency fund that's already been approved?
Through your worship, that's one option, yes.
Are there more options? Through you, your worship.
Other than the 2.5 million that we have set aside for the COVID-related expenses, their money in the asset sales that still there's a residual amount that still sits in there, so this potentially could come from that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Jeffrey.
Spacebar does not always work. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. My question is the question I always ask with the hospital, and I think my question changed a little bit with the CAO's comments regarding the potential for Collingwood going forward as an alternate emergency center. But we know that our hospital serves a large catchment area. And is there an ask going out to the other municipalities to offset these monies?
Through your worship, Councillor Jeffrey, no, I don't think that request has been made. I think part of the reason why they came to us is because of the location, but I think more importantly is the ability for us to share the use. If we were to proceed with this, I suspect that it would probably be available more for our use than the hospital use. And so with those considerations in mind, it was optimal for the hospital to come and ask us rather than others to make a contribution.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Comey, you had your hand up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chief Parr then, please. If I'm understanding CAOM correctly, this becomes a secondary emergency location possibility, and I know you hold all the plans and directives related to that. Do you support this location as a good optimal secondary emergency site? Will it go into your sort of master plan if this moves forward?
Chief Parr?
Through your worship, absolutely, I support this. It's a perfect location for us. The functionality of the building is 100%. We couldn't ask for more, because if the hospital has, it can fill in for their use, it would fill in for our use 100%. I just wanted to clarify one thing that is part of it. The cost right now does not include the price of a generator. The hospital has in their contingency plan costing for, availability to attain a generator. I think that, or not, I know as today they do have a price for a generator as it stands today, but right now we don't have, that's not included in any of their costings. The advantage to us, if what's being proposed to be put in for infrastructure, we also have availability of 5 portable generators for the county of Simcoe in times for emergency that they have deployed across the county, so we can always power the building up until such times a generator can be supplied and installed. It's just that the ability to get a generator right now that meets the requirements is pretty far out because of the cost to build, time to build, and delivery time.
Councillor Comey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Parr, that was a great response, and thank you for pointing something out. I think potentially a lot of us miss. I'm interpreting this ask as a generator and maybe a plinth for it to sit on, and then you're pointing out, no, this ask is for sort of the housing it's going to go in. It made me think of pushing over to Director Slama for a minute, because we know she needs a generator time to time. So thank you for clarifying that. I would be in favor, I shared a council with the idea that's coming from the COVID fund. We already set it aside for that reason. I mean, if we go in for up to 100,000, what, about 4% of the total fund we put aside is specifically for this type of situation. So I fully support this idea coming out of the COVID fund that we established for these exact type of reasons. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I thank COMN for coordinating this effort. This is exactly what we were looking to do as a council.
Thank you for that. Any other comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'm starting with you, Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman. Oh, sorry, he's declared a conflict, so he will not be participating. Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor.
My apologies. The space bar is spacing out. Definitely in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Mcleod.
I apologize for leading you two astray. In favor.
And that is carried unanimously. I don't know how we're going to signal Councillor Berman to return. Well,
yep,
that was done quickly. Notices of motion. I don't think we have any. County report. I know you reported at the last meeting. Deputy Mayor, is there anything you want to add?
Just the, Your Worship, 13.1.
Yes. The county report?
No, I was just suggesting 13.1, whether we had.
Oh, the tax, sorry, my bylaw, right. Okay. The dedicated gas tax funding allocation. It's moved by Councillor Madigan, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved, the bylaw number 2020-24 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the letter of agreement for the use of the dedicated gas tax funds for the public transportation program between Her Majesty, the Queen and Riot of Ontario and the town of Collingwood. I guess I should say be approved. Being about, okay, well, all right. So I will call the vote. I'm starting with Councillor Madigan. Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
Sorry, Your Worship, just for the public, what was the amount that we were accessing this year?
The province awarded us, I might have to, I don't see it in the bylaws, so I'm going to have to ask, I think it was over 390,000, but I'm going to ask Marjorie, do you have the number? for the gas tax.
Through you, your worship, it was, I believe it was just 320,000. Well,
Okay.
just 320,000 this year, so.
All right. So the number's not in the bylaw that I see, but that's the amount that we're talking about, Councillor Jeffrey, or Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I knew, I just wondered if the public would be interested.
So how do you vote?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Berman, you're back.
I'm back in favor.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin,
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor,
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod,
In favor.
and Councillor Comey.
In favor.
That is carried unanimously. All right, so that does take us through to a county report. And I was, Deputy Mayor, is there anything you wanted to add about the county report this week?
Sorry,
Now what?
excuse me, your worship, there is
Yes,
a motion.
go ahead. There is a motion. Okay, where is the notice of motion?
I believe Councillor Comey's going to provide it.
Okay, Councillor Comey, go
Am I
ahead.
off mute? Yes, okay, look, I already hit my spacer. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to thank Clerk Almas for all her help with this. It's something I really had hoped to be able to waive notice of motion on to make life, what I'm hoping, a little easier on staff who, like all of us, are working from home and probably have childcare and elder care responsibilities, or potentially both. But I understand from the clerk, this really is a bylaw thing. So it's going to require notice of motion to allow for public input. And that notice, that motion is that council hereby authorizes the change in meeting time for regular meetings of council and standing committees to a daytime hour of 1:30 p.m. for the duration of the declaration of emergency declared by the province or as otherwise recommended by the CAO.
Thank you. And that will be dealt with on our meeting next Monday. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are there any other notices of motion before I move on? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor, we never finished our conversation. Is there anything you wanted to add to the county report for this week?
There isn't specifically. If anyone had a question, I'd be happy to do my best to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions, council? Seeing none, we'll go on to item 16, 16.1, old or deferred business. And I think there's a number of items, Councillor Hamlin, that you wanted to address. First being the social support network. Or is that for Jennifer Parker? Councillor Hamlin?
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item, as you see, I have a few items under other business. So the first one, what this is referring to is, as we all know, we have substantial loss of employment, closure of many businesses in our town, and it's created not only financial but social hardships for many of the residents. And of course, council has recently committed to an economic support and recovery task force. However, I have been thinking it's important that council have a better understanding of the social supports and networks available in our community. And I had some discussions about whether we should indeed establish a social support and recovery task force, or perhaps engage in other ways to alleviate the social impacts being felt in our community. And perhaps, although it's too early to tell, whether there should ultimately be access to the emergency contingency fund for this purpose. But last week, I became aware that our staff has been working on the social support initiative. And I believe that Director Culver and a member of his team would like to provide an update on this work at this time.
Director Culver, do you have an update for us on this?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to try and share screen here. So bear with me. Hopefully it works out okay, Your Worship. Are you guys able to see that? Not yet.
No.
Okay, and I'll try this way. There we go.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Worship, for the time to talk. Councillor Hamlin had been in discussion for several times over the last week or so regarding what staff is doing to try and support social services in Collingwood. And I will obviously, and I think everybody is well aware of how amazing Jennifer Parker is and the fact that she sort of digs into these things and helps make things better with her participation. So all the credit to her. So I think council is aware that one of the initiatives we undertook was to try and help facilitate a community response roundtable. So this was trying to get all of the social service agencies together, or anybody with a related social service capacity, into a virtual room in order to discuss and determine whether there was capacities that needed to be shored up, whether there were resources that could be shared, and essentially just to make sure that the network was functioning and in a related way, so that for the best outcome for the community. So so the objectives are here on this slide. We wanted to build a coordinated response. We wanted to identify needs and capacities, any surplus resources that might exist, and resource deficits that might exist. We wanted to have the network build on its own understanding of best practices by learning from one another. We wanted to strengthen communication, and we wanted the messaging to be consistent across the board so that everybody could also benefit. And then one of the things that we'd hoped for, especially in this COVID time, was to build some sort of collection of data so that, and measurements, so that we could understand where the gaps exist. Really, I'll be honest with you, after the very first meeting with this group, we were discovering that the gaps are very few. Not to say that there aren't some, and also not to say that there won't be some that come down the line as the pandemic continues. But it's been reassuring to be a part of this this conversation. Also, too, I'd like to make note at the bottom of the slide here that initially their focus was on Collingwood, but it was a reach out from a sub-region group to sort of build up a similar idea across, I guess, what you call the South Georgian Bay area. And that meeting happened last week as well. Jennifer spoke at it, and I believe that it's going to be an excellent way to sort of dial in for an even more, a broader possibility of enhanced capacities. Let's see if I can get to slide 2. So this is what we've been doing. We've been trying to identify resources that could be shared. This would equal increased capacity if we could find some ways to help everybody identify the resources they are sharing within the groups. We did do a virtual roundtable last Tuesday, I believe it was. We have one scheduled for tomorrow, and I will say that we were extremely pleased with the participation of all 35 members of the organization that joined us last week. Based on tomorrow, we should see a larger number because the overall group has grown to about 50. The next steps will be working on developing some sort of structure for the committee, so chairmanship and or chairpersonship, I should say, and subgroups, actions as identified by the group. And then the other thing we're looking at is trying to promote 211 as sort of the front door for social services. This is actually our best effort and best concept for developing the measurements and gap analysis that we talked about. 211 does deliver a report every week that lets us know what their calls have been. And as we push more and more awareness of the 211 possibility, that'll help us with building more measurements and more data. And just like I mentioned, there's 50 agencies, and you can see the broad sort of cross section. I believe as of today or late last week, the OPP is also a part of this group. So it is broadening out, and all sectors are participating sectors, I think, are working towards being represented. So the other activity that we've been taking on is the building of the Collingwood Together platform. So it was launched on April 7th. This is the volunteer platform, I should say, the collection place. At this point, and it may be appropriate in Volunteer Week to notice that 150 residents have applied to the database, as the mayor had mentioned. We also launched a needs platform. So it was one thing to develop a funnel to gather volunteers, but it was also necessary to develop a platform by which the needs that were identified through the 211 front door could be translated into actions by the volunteer task force, so or task volunteer capacity. So the platform was actually launched on April 15th, which is and it was used. So what happens is the needs come into 211. They use a Google Maps, or sorry, a Google Docs system to communicate the information right now to Collingwood town staff, but very soon it will actually be taken over by Rotary personnel. Rotary has stepped up. Both local Rotary clubs, Georgian Bay and Collingwood, have both stepped up to provide some volunteer help to facilitate that turning point that goes from 211 identifying the need to the volunteer base that would execute and help with that need. Yeah, so we're sort of looking at a response time with Rotary of about 24 hours. To date, we have not received needs through that platform, but we are hopeful that through the promotion of the 211 service that we'll see people respond. And then this is just a quick slide to talk about Collingwood Connects. So if you have needs in the community and have access to needs in the community or know of anything, you should call 211, because they actually are the best switchboarding you to services that can help. We're asking organizations to make sure that they're keeping their information up to date when it comes to 211. That's one of the challenges that was identified in the first meeting with the roundtable group, is that we want to make sure that organizations are keeping their information current so that the operators can help. And then these are just a couple of quick 211 online mini tools that will help anybody in need. And again, these will be part of what we're pushing out to the community. So in general, that's sort of, I guess, a broad overview. I do have a flowchart slide that I was working on today that unfortunately I couldn't get done in time for this meeting, but once it's complete, it's almost complete. I'll send that out to council as well, so that you're aware of how inputs come in and how actions occur. So it should be a little bit easier to understand.
Thank you very much, Dean. That's you guys have been very busy and you've accomplished a great deal. So thank you to you and your staff for that. Councillor Hamlin, is there anything further?
Yes, 2 points, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I just want to thank Director Culver and Jennifer so much on behalf of council for taking this on and creating these roundtable discussions with our charitable nonprofits and others to identify gaps and, connect for needs that are so essential at this time. And I know I want to say in particular, knowing that these 2 individuals and perhaps others have gone way beyond what a park, rec, and culture might be familiar with, and beyond their areas of expertise. So totally appreciate it. Now I have 2 questions. The first is whether there might be a staff person who could be a point person when immediate needs are identified by members of council or even members of the community that we can reach out to. And for example, yesterday I was speaking with one of the nonprofits in our community, and it turned out they had immediate needs for PPE. and I didn't know who to call with that, who do I approach? So my first question of Director Culver through you, Mr. Mayor, is who would I call on staff with this information, and what would happen with this request when I make it?
Director Culver?
I think for right now, I would be the best contact. Definitely Jennifer and I are working very, very closely together. So we both coordinate on whatever answer we could research and come back to you with. Again, I appreciate that you recognize it's not part of our normal work routines, but during the COVID pandemic, we think we could probably help. I'd also encourage you to direct questions through 211 as much as possible, because that really is the front door, and it is the best place for us to start developing distribution of questions and responses.
And Dean, I guess just on the PPE front, maybe I'll give you some context, because I've been dealing with 5 of our local nursing homes and the hospital on the PPE front. We have a number of our local businesses and residents who have gone to great extent to retool their businesses to produce hand sanitizer, to produce surgical masks. I understand tomorrow one of our residents has retooled a plant in China, and the first shipment will be coming in to supply both the hospital and a couple of the health nursing homes. And as well, we've been getting donations from the city. So, and what I'll do is connect you, and the face shields too. We've had a couple of local businesses producing thousands of face shields. So all of that stuff's available. So what I'll do is send on that information to you and Jennifer, so you can quarterback that stuff. That would be great.
Absolutely.
And my second question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Culver. Several councillors have mentioned to me in the last few days that they do have an interest in participating in the roundtable, with the understanding it would continue to be facilitated by your team and not set up as another committee or a task force of council at this time. So this would have the advantage of letting council members participate and feel connected to discussion regarding the needs and resources being sought and also being provided. Of course, if it turns out there's any areas of concerns that those participating from council consider would benefit from council support, a discussion could always be brought to the council table with your input. So I wanted to know if you might be agreeable to having some members of council participate in this fashion. Less than 4, of course, we can't have a quorum.
Yeah, less than 5. Yep, so it could be 4. Director Culver.
Through your worship, so certainly I don't have a problem with council. Council will give direction and we follow council's direction. I think that I would like to make it as clear as possible that the town's role in this roundtable is as a facilitator at this time. And we're looking actually at how can the roundtable itself develop its first line of resource and capacity building. And actually, these people are actually very, very skilled and talented. They do this all the time in terms of accessing county, provincial, and federal funding in order to look after their needs. And what we're hoping is that this roundtable will actually help enhance that ability. And we're just the facilitators. So council is obviously more than welcome to participate, but what I would suggest is that it be taken on in a passive form, and we allow this organization to grow and develop its strength from within. Because that was sort of what was intended at the outset.
Councillor Hamlin.
That's perfect. That is exactly what I think needs to be done, and perhaps individual councillors then could contact Director Culver directly in this regard.
Is that something we can facilitate, Dean? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so on other matters under other business.
Your worship, Councillor Comey has a question.
Yeah, Councillor Comey, go ahead.
Spacebar stopped working for me too. Oh gosh, okay, maybe it goes to sleep. Thank Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, first I want to thank Councillor Hamlin so much, and Director Culver. I know you guys spent a lot of time discussing this, and without question, you know, further to Councillor Hamlin's comments, we all celebrate the work Director Culver, you and Jennifer have taken on during this time. It is above and beyond, and it's duly noted. I present the notion to my fellow councillors for us to carefully consider that we fully respect and celebrate the economic task force, development force, and the wonderful team of rock stars and councillors that were assembled to support it. How do we ensure to our residents an understanding that both of these things have been equally weighted? So you can understand that on the one hand, this team was assembled for an economic redevelopment. And here we have on the shoulders of Director Culver and Jen, 50 organizations that they are doing a roundtable discussion with and working to spackle the gaps and get out into the community. I just want to ensure as a council, we are giving them all the support they need. And maybe that leads into item 2 that Councillor Hamlin's brought, which is this 2.5 million. So I just want to make sure through the lens of our residents that they see that their council has worked hard to ensure there's a balance between both the economic recovery and the social services needs. And we haven't just sort of slugged it off onto PRC to do the best they can and come to us when they can. So Director Culver, I asked this question through the mayor to my fellow councillors to ensure we're truly supporting you in the needs you may have. That's an enormous task to take on.
Director Culver.
If I may, I mean, I appreciate the compliments, I guess, but I want to make sure that it's understood that it's, you know, Jennifer is definitely doing a lot of work. I'm trying to support Jennifer. We've also had participation by the clerk's office and Sarah and her staff, as well as IT and their staff as well. So as much as I appreciate what you're suggesting, I also want to make sure that everybody, it's not just us. There's been a group of people who are involved in helping get this thing started.
And if I can add a clarification, I don't think there should be any misconception or doubt in the public that this $2.5 million contingency fund is earmarked for any specific purpose or cause, whether it be economic or for our residents. We already know that the waiving of the property taxes, the interest and penalty payment is coming out of that fund. This is a global fund that we've kind of established to give our staff and ourselves an idea of what is the framework, the context in which we're prepared to work in to provide relief to our residents in whatever form that takes. So this money is not preordained for any specific cause or sector. It's available for all aspects of relief for our community. And this council is tasked with a difficult job to make decisions moving forward. And so the Economic Task Force will be reporting to council for council to make decisions. And we are very fortunate to have had our staff take the steps to initiate the contact with the social sector and the social enterprise sector. And we have also taken steps already to try and grant some relief to our residents on the ground. So these funds are not, they're not weighted in any particular direction. They're there for us to have a context to our discussions about what are we prepared to do and how much do we think we can contribute to one aspect or one program. And all of those decisions will be made by this council with the opportunity for full discussion and full input from our residents.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. But just further my point, and I fully respect what Director Culver is saying. I just want my fellow councillors to think about the weighted impact between the two. And Director Culver, I hope you'll continue to come to us. And if need be, we will gladly assemble the same type of team that was put together for an economic task force that we can potentially do for our residents on the social services side. So I just hope you're hearing that opportunity, that we want to ensure you have the full support of council and any other expert needs you may have, as was designated to an economic task force.
Councillor Culver, or Director Culver?
Yep, thank you. I hear.
Okay, good. Thank you, Councillor Comey. Moving then through the items under other business. Was there any other items that you have, Councillor Hamlin?
Yes. The second item, Mr. Mayor, you just clarified by saying that the emergency contingency fund is available for all COVID-related purposes. So I don't need to address that.
Okay.
My third point is revolving around authorization to access the emergency contingency fund. I've had a number of inquiries from residents to the effect they want to be assured that only council and not staff and not the economic support and economic task force have the authority to draw on these funds. And I did take a few minutes and review the minutes from our March 25th special council meeting where this fund was established by resolution. There's discussion in those minutes from our CAO saying the following with respect to how the emergency funds could be drawn down. And he says that it's his intention that all drawdowns would come to council for approval unless minor in nature, if delegation of authority is provided. Council did pass a resolution to provide delegated authority during the COVID-19 pandemic to the CAO for matters deemed necessary and minor in nature. So what I wanted to suggest this evening, Mr. Mayor, is that that we have a specific council resolution where we clarify, not just through discussion from our CAO on what his intentions would be, but that we re-clarify in particular, and I would say the resolution would read as follows. All drawdowns to the emergency contingency fund be approved by council before they are made, except that the CAO be provided delegated authority to access the funds for items of a minor nature, being up to a value of $5,000, which must be reported to council prior to committing the funds. So I guess in respect to this item, I would be asking how I could bring this forward and if this is the appropriate time to ask for a seconder.
So I think to answer your first question, if you, to the extent that your motion reflects the minutes of the discussion around the contingency fund from the last meeting, we can proceed with that today. However, if you wish to implement a ceiling of $5,000 that was not discussed in the minutes, then that would require a notice of motion and would kick it forward to the next meeting. So you've read in your notice. I'll look to the clerk for confirmation of that, but that would be, is my understanding of the procedural bylaw.
Through your worship, I would agree.
So Councillor Hamlin, if you're absent adding the ceiling of $5,000, this motion could, for clarification, could go forward right now because it's consistent with the minutes around the discussion when the last motion was passed. If you wish to put the $5,000 ceiling on it, then it would be a notice of motion to be discussed at the next council meeting.
I'm content to leave the ceiling off and have it proceed now.
Okay, then my understanding, Clerk Thomas, is that we can put that on the floor. You can look for a seconder and we can deal with it right now.
Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for Councillor Hamlin's clarification? Councillor Doherty. Any questions or comments, Council? Councillor Mcleod.
Could Councillor Hamlin reread that for me, please?
Councillor Hamlin?
Certainly. All drawdowns from the emergency contingency fund be approved by council before they are made, except that the CAO be provided delegated authority to access the funds for items of a minor nature, which must be reported to council prior to committing the funds.
Does that assist, Councillor Mcleod?
Thank you very much.
All right. So we've got the motion on the table and it's been seconded by Councillor Doherty. Seeing no questions or comments, then we will go through the list and I will start with you, Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Mcleod?
In favor.
Councillor Comey?
In favor.
Councillor Madigan?
In favor.
Councillor Doherty?
In favor.
Councillor Berman,
In favor.
and Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
All right, so that is passed. Item number 4, under other business, financial update of the town.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked for this item to be put on the agenda because there have been so many discussions over the last few weeks about the fact that municipalities are being ignored by the senior levels of government during this pandemic, which has become a financial crisis for many municipalities. I have read that Vancouver is predicting bankruptcy. Barrie projects to lose 65 million in revenue this year, and it goes on. So I thought it would be important for us to understand the current financial status of Collingwood now that we are over a month into this pandemic. And I would like to understand in particular such things as the decrease in revenue we have seen and are projecting, what the uptake on tax payment deferrals has been, and our cash flow status. I do understand our treasurer is keeping a close tab on our finances and is prepared to provide an update today. When she is finished, I do have one comment and one question. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie, and I guess hopefully you'll include it at our sort of our weekly burn rate, which I know we've just provided to FCM for their use.
Thank you, Your Worship. As of last week, we had $92 million cash in the bank, $17 million in GICs, for a total of $109 million, and $30 million of that was totally restricted because it was in relation to development charges. We have 3,000 taxpayers that use the pre-authorized payment plans. Only 67 have asked for to be taken out of the plans, but they will go back in. We've had half a dozen, I think, that have asked to have the remainder of their payments spread over the remainder of the year instead of until October. The province has announced the school board payments normally due in June can be deferred to September, which would be approximately $3 million. The county and it has offered a similar deferral for their payments, which would be approximately the same amount in June. May 15th is the due date of the next installment for municipal taxes. So by the end of May, we should be in a better position to determine the lag in payments that may occur through the COVID. In terms of savings, this again won't become apparent until sometime in May. The May hydro bills should be based on April usage, where we've had our facilities closed for the full month, so we could have an estimate there. And that would definitely give us a better potential to determine the savings. Gas prices have gone down significantly, as has our vehicle and equipment usage. And again, there'll be a delay in realizing those reductions simply because we need to process the transactions through the system. In the end, the largest revenue loss that I predict that we will have will be on interest income. The rate that we were earning was 2.35%. And as of Friday, it was down to 0.75%. So for instance, in December of 2019, we earned $183,000 in interest. And we're anticipating that to decline to less than $100,000. And again, as I say, we won't know the true impacts until probably in sometime later in May, when we can have a chance to process all of the information that we have. Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Jeffrey had a request from FCM, and the mayor alluded to it, saying what the weekly burn rate was, or in terms of what we thought this was costing us. And it's basically a net lost revenues. And the figure that we've arrived at for today, in the position that I have, is about 36,500 a week. And to your worship, that would be my quick little update as to where we stand.
Thank you, Marjorie. Councillor Hammond, you have any questions? Again, Councillor Hammond, if you unmute.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our treasurer. So is it fair to say, I think I heard you say that you will know more about our financial system, our financial situation, but not for another month?
Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, yes, that would be correct. We don't get, because of the social distancing and the way that we've changed our processes to handle things, it's a little bit of a delay on getting the information into my financial system. And in particular, one of the biggest places that we're going to save money is with hydro, and they are a month behind in billing. So my April invoices only cover the month of March. April will have a full month when the pool and the other facilities are on half full, and the library's off and those sorts of things. Again, as I said, we can only compare the monthly usage because we would have had, for the month of May, we would have had all of our part-time parks people there using all of their parks and equipment. And again, I won't know what the difference between the gas mileage or those costs will be until I can compare last year to this year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is it possible for us to see a financial update in writing, like with the numbers that you're working with and the items?
Just Marjorie, just so I can get clarification, do you mean the financial update we're getting now or the one coming forward in May?
Through you, your worship, at this moment in time, my staff and I are working to get the 2019 year end done. We have not turned our heads to take a look at what has gone on specifically at this point in time in 2020. Again, as I've said, the only way that we can provide you with any type of a possible update is to wait until we have comparable figures so we can compare the months of March, April, and May in 2020 with the months of March, April, and May in 2019. And that won't happen until the end of those months.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Marjorie, and that's why I was asking Councillor Hamlin if he was talking about the update we're receiving now or the one we will be receiving when we have a month of comparables.
So what we're looking at then, because I feel this is a very important thing for council, who, of course, one of our main duties as set out in the Municipal Act is looking after the finances of this community. So I would wonder then if there's a specific meeting date that will be targeted for when we're going to get this information.
Just again, for the clarification, are you talking about the month of May or the numbers that we've just received today?
I'm talking about the more fulsome look that our treasurer won't be able to do until mid-May.
Right, so yeah, looking for the month of comparables. Marjorie, when will you be able to provide that to council?
Through you, your worship, at this point in time, my best guess would be not until towards the end of May or perhaps the middle of June, based on my current work plan and volume of work that I and my staff have.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, is there any potential that we would be running a deficit this year based on the numbers you're looking at now?
Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, I'm not sure we haven't run a deficit in 2019. I haven't got the year end done, and the judicial inquiry costs for 2019 were $5,155,000, which has probably stripped out, as I have said before, we've stripped out all of our reserves. So there's a potential that there's a deficit last year and one this year.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you for your answer to those questions. I'll speak further with our CAO about these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Are there any more items that you have under the other business, Councillor Hamlin? You can
have put
unmute.
on-
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. I had asked also an item be put on the agenda to ask for a timeline to review the budget to determine efficiencies and establish a plan to make sure that we're maintaining a balanced budget. And so I do have a motion that I wanted to bring forward in this regard, and I'll read it. It relates to the fact that we have previously in the March 25 council meeting resolved to work with staff to review the 2020 budget for projects that may not occur or where other efficiencies or cost savings may be identified, so savings can be allocated to the emergency contingency fund to offset any monies that are spent. But here's the motion. I would like it to make it a bit broader, and so I'll just read it to get things moving here. Whereas Council approved resolution number 2020-078 to review the 2020 budget for projects that may not occur in 2020 or where other efficiencies or cost savings may be identified that could be reallocated to the emergency contingency fund for COVID-19 to offset the funds needed from the sale of proceeds. Be it resolved that Council authorized the 2020 budget review to be expanded to include that any cost savings or efficiencies identified not be limited to just offsetting the funds being used from the asset sale proceeds, but also to offset other losses across the corporation that were unexpected as a result of the COVID-19 crisis to ensure a balanced budget. And further, this is the second part, that Council requests staff to report back at the next SIC meeting regarding the status of the review and the anticipated timeline.
Got your motion, and that will be on the agenda for next Monday.
Thank you so much.
Councillor, are there any other items of other business? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just wanted to extend my sincerest appreciation to the treasurer amidst all the other things that she has going on for participating and providing information for FCM to provide a backdrop of the smaller municipalities and the impacts of COVID and how they are developing their asks and having their conversations with the Deputy Prime Minister. So I do appreciate those efforts very much through to the Treasurer, and FCM has thanked me numerous times for our willingness to help with the information. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, and hopefully we will get traction with all of those recommendations. Councillor Mcleod, other business.
Thank you. I was wondering if it's possible for us to receive the deck that Director Culver showed to us earlier. If we can have that sent to us, and also the deck that was put together by Councillor Matrosovs.
I'll look to Sarah. Are we able to send those out? Yes, and I think there was one additional slide that Dean wanted, so maybe if we just hold off a day until he's got that schematic slide done, they can send them out all at once.
Terrific. Secondly, I'm cognizant of the response that our treasurer gave us regarding some of these requests, and I wonder, is it expedient for us to perhaps offer some assistance to the Treasury Department in the form of bringing in our auditor earlier or something like that? I sense the frustration, and I understand that the workload is high. Or is there a chance to redeploy some of our workers from elsewhere to be of assistance? This is clearly a lot of work, and we are clearly in the performance of our fiduciary duties, asking for a lot. How can we help make this all happen?
I think I'll look to the CAO for that answer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the Councillor. Marjorie and her staff have been sort of going flat out to try and get the 2019 budget and 2020 budget sorted out. And the concern, in addition to the workload, is also with the social distancing issues, because staff cannot sort of work in close proximity to the other. They may not be able to access information on a timely basis. So that's I think that's the big issue in terms of redeploying staff, we've been looking at that almost every day across the organization to try and shore up parts of the organization that require support. For example, we did provide Marjorie's some support on the customer service side when council agreed to the tax deferral and some of the related issues regarding penalties and late fees. So we're constantly looking at redeployment, but I don't think this redeployment could help in the social distancing considerations that we have to meet with. I just also want to assure council that we're on an ongoing basis monitoring our financial situation. And I think we're going to identify any early signals or any early warning that would have to be ratcheted up or elevated up to council level. And even May or early June may not give us a complete picture. So I want to caution members of council, we'll probably bring forward an interim financial consideration for 2020, but bills and invoices and revenues and expenditures might just be coming in because at that time we'll probably be in the back end of the COVID-19 crisis. So we would not have fully accrued all of our expenses and or revenue. So I don't want council to be left with the impression that things aren't happening. We are doing the monitoring. That's one of the reasons why we were able to get Councillor Jeffrey the information that she requested for FCM. We know what the burn rate is, and I think that's an important consideration for us because we can identify on a monthly basis how much money that we're going through and what's the expenses over revenue. But as Marjorie said, it is a challenge to get all that information within the next few weeks to bring a credible report to council. So I would ask council to give us some ability to do the work that we need to do and bring forward something that's a bit more credible to council towards early summer rather than bringing something forward now that may not have the fiscal wherewithal to provide you with the information that you're looking for.
Councillor Mcleod.
Thank you. I want to assist in any way that we can to do the work that needs to get done. So if that's what has to happen, then that's what has to happen.
Any other business? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I had intended to perhaps bring this under a notice of motion and perhaps even ask to waive notice. And I apologize, I've got a bad headache. So I'm, that's why I'm kind of sitting in the dark here. And anyway, so I completely missed it. So if you like, can I bring it now or you tell me?
Nope, go right ahead, Deputy Mayor.
So I'll read it and then, but what I would like to do is perhaps ask that the ability to waive so that we could deal with this tonight.
Sure, why don't you put the notice on and then explain the urgency and we'll deal with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Whereas the Canadian Emergency Business Account, known as CEBA, loan put into place by the Government of Canada provides relief to business owners as a result of COVID-19. And whereas a number of businesses in Collingwood do not meet the qualifications to apply to the CEBA loan, therefore be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Collingwood herein petition the upper levels of government to expedite emergency funding programs for small business and self-employed individuals that currently do not qualify for the CEBA funding program.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor, maybe we can just do some justification for why we should deal with it, waive notice.
Thank you. So like some things that we have already tackled in the past couple of weeks, this is a very fluid situation. And by the time that we actually deal with it in a traditional fashion by bringing it back to council for our next meeting, it's quite possible that the federal government, who is dealing with this issue on a daily basis, may come up with a solution or rectify the situation on their own. In the interim, though, given that we have been contacted, I was contacted, the mayor was contacted, by residents, business owners who are in these particular cases on our main street, who do not qualify under the current thresholds that have been established by this program. They are advocating, whether it be us, whether it be through their local member of parliament, whether it be through the BIA, et cetera, that we simply convey or lend our voice of support so the federal government is aware of these gaps within the current policies that they've put in place.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for the motion to waive notice? Councillor Doherty. I don't know if there's any need for comments or questions, so I'm going to call the vote, and I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor, since it's your motion.
In favor.
And Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
And Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
And I'm also in favor. So we've waived the notice and we've got the motion on the floor. The Deputy Mayor, is there anything else you'd like to say about the motion?
No, I would just look for a seconder.
Yes, Councillor Jeffrey. Sorry, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Councillor Jeffrey seconded, it's on the floor. Questions or comments, Council? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I think Councillor Doherty may have seconded that, Mayor Saunderson. I was putting up my hand to comment, so I don't want to usurp her seconding.
I think I had a seconding for the waiver, the notice of waiver. So,
okay, no
so I'll
problem.
put you down. Yeah.
I'm happy to second. Okay. So I just wanted to assure the Deputy Mayor and for him to assure the people to whom he speaks that FCM is all over that gap. And so, I mean, obviously I'm in favor if we're going to add our voice to that. But I can assure you that FCM is all over that gap.
Okay, thank you.
It's huge all across Canada, including the agriculture sector as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge issue. Any other comments or questions, Council? Councillor Comey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, could you just kindly, from my own information, provide an example of a business that doesn't currently fit?
Yeah, I think it's a payroll issue, but I'll look to the Deputy Mayor.
My apologies. Without giving maybe, for privacy, if that's okay, without giving an example of a name or person,
sure.
The type of business would be one in where there are no employees, for example, and there may be, what's the lack of word that I'm looking for? The way in which the individuals who are the sole proprietors who own the business, in way that they either are paying themselves or not paying themselves, have eliminated them from eligibility.
Okay.
Or further, the thresholds that were established in some cases have been established too high and eliminated people in that respect as well. So there's a movement to lower those thresholds so that people can, depending on their income, would be able to apply. If I may just, I do apologize. I'm really not thinking here. I may just defer to, or refer, I should say, to the mayor, because he's familiar with some of these examples as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Certainly a number of the contacts that I've been receiving, so it's required to have a payroll over $50,000. So many sole entrepreneurs don't even incorporate. So they're drawing down their wages through the profits so that they can write it off, and they don't have a payroll. There's other businesses where they are incorporated, but there may be only 1 or 2 active shareholders, and rather than drawing down a salary to T4, they're paying themselves in dividends for the tax treatment. So there's a number of issues, scenarios, and that's probably not all of them. That's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's others, but where an applicant may not satisfy the payroll of over $50,000. And so it's hugely prejudicial to them. And when you consider that of our 3,100 odd businesses registered in Collingwood, 66% of them are solo entrepreneurs. It definitely catches a large swath of our businesses. Councillor Jeffrey has her hands up, so I'll give her the floor.
Just specific to that, the federal government did reduce the wage requirement to 20,000 on the CEBA. So,
So it's
or
coming down.
on the, so just, they are hearing, and they did make some adjustment, but probably not enough to what it is we want.
Right. So it's some accommodation, and so there is some movement, and there may be another program that they come up with. It's not necessarily the CEBA program, but would capture all of these unincorporated businesses or smaller businesses. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will call the vote, and I will start with Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor?
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
Favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
And I think I started with you, Councillor Mcleod. Is that right? Have I gone through everybody? Okay, good. So that is passed unanimously then. Is there any other items under other business? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to circle us back just quickly and to clarify, and I apologize if I missed it. I suppose through you to the treasurer, will council be provided a copy of the FCM data that was compiled?
I don't think that's been asked for, but Councillor Treasurer Leonard.
Through you, your worship, and not a problem. I'll send that out in the morning. Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much. And then secondly, I just want to take a moment to thank Councillor Hamlin. She put together a lot there under other business, and I'm going to call that a lot of heavy lifting that she put forth on behalf of council, and I appreciate her taking that on. So thank you very much, Councillor Hamlin.
Sarah, did you have a, trying to get my
Certainly.
attention? Okay.
Yes, certainly through your worship. There was 2 other items that were noted today. So based on the time, we can defer them to next week, or if you're able to provide some quick updates. The one was an update regarding the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, and the other one was just a COVID-19 status update from the community and municipalities input or in.
I think looking at the hour and given that the meeting is next week, we have some in-camera stuff to deal with. So if council's okay, I'm going to defer these items to the next meeting so that we can push forward with what we've got on the agenda. Thanks, Sarah. So if there's no other items under other business, we have a motion to go in camera. It's moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. It reads, whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board members, board employees. Items for discussion: A, appointment of committee members, accessibility, heritage, and museum, and B, review of the CAO position. Are there any questions or comments before I go through the vote? So I'm starting with you, Councillor Berman.
Sorry,
Sarah. Did I miss something?
My apologies, through your worship. Actually, it should be noted the review of the CAO position also includes the ratification of the terms of the support services.
Okay, and you can add that in. So that's duly noted, Council, that there's a C. B was a review of the CAO position, and C is ratification of support services. Yeah. So with that being added, I'm going to start with you, Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
And I am in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
Councillor Mcleod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor with request for a short break before we proceed.
I'll deal with that. Councillor Madigan
In favor.
and Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
All right, so we're going in camera in a video conferencing context, but why don't we take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 20 after 9. If that's good. And Sarah, we can patch in then.
If everybody could leave themselves connected, that is preferred. So remain connected. Everybody else will be removed from the meeting. The live stream will be shut off, but stay connected, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We're now live streaming.
Okay. All right. It looks like we've got everybody that was left out has joined us.
Okay.
Pardon me.
So I'm looking for a motion to rise from in camera. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Mcleod. We'll start with you, Deputy Mayor. How do you vote?
Thank you, Councillor Mcleod, for your suggestion of using. I vote in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Mcleod.
I voted the stupid space bar. It was Zoom. I vote in favor of rising and reporting.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin. I got that. And I'm in favor. So we are rising and reporting on the in-camera session. We have provided direction to staff with respect to the succession planning for the CAO position. And we will be reporting back next Monday, April 27th in open session on that. So I think that brings us to the confirming bylaw, confirmatory bylaw, and it's moved by Councillor Hamlin, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2025, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held April 20, 2020, be enacted and passed this 20th day of April. And we'll start with you, Councillor Mcleod.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Yes.
Councillor Madigan.
Yes.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin. I missed it. Did you say in favor, Councillor Hamlin? Sorry, I didn't hear it. Okay, thank you. Got it. I'm in favor, and Deputy Mayor.
I'm in favor.
All right, so that is the confirmatory bylaw, and I want to thank everyone for a busy night. It was a long meeting. We covered a lot of ground. And with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn, Councillor Jeffrey, and we're just all going to wave good night. So all in favor, we're waving good night. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.